Chapter 833. 12 bolts of lightning struck down. Lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled on Mountain Tenya. The Buddha stood under the Vajra shield and looked at Phoenix from afar. Phoenix covered her head with her hands amid the raging flames. Her fifth sense began to fade. In the midst of the blood, the Phoenix could no longer stand and fell down the stairs. The 9 heavens. Demons danced wildly. Within the 6 paths, almost everyone was shocked by the thunderous sound. Evil spirits emerged from the sea of blood. What's going on? Did something happen to Buddhism? It seems that the ancient Buddhas have abandoned Buddhism and are suffering from the heavenly tribulation. Abandoned Buddhism? How are they going to survive? Who would be so stupid? The demons suddenly looked up at the sky as they talked. Amidst the raging flames, a dazzling radiance could be seen. A beautiful giant tail flashed across the horizon. That is the ancient Phoenix? Boom! 31 bolts of lightning. Mountain Tenya was shaken and the sky collapsed. A corner of the Vajra shield was broken. The Buddhas inside frowned. The scattered little Buddhist monks were washed into Mountain Tenya's ice river. Phoenix was on the verge of death. Her beautiful original form lay on the ground. Her soft feathers flowed with blood, dyeing the entire Buddhist path red. I'll ask you one more time. Are you really going to abandon Buddhism? Phoenix looked up at the sky and smiled. At that moment, all the unruliness and mockery appeared on the surface. Everyone knew that if Phoenix still had her Buddhist bones, she might be able to survive the 33 bolts of lightning. However, she used the most resolute way to despise Buddhism. That unique attitude seemed to be saying that no one in this world could command her. Not even the Buddhas. Get out of my sight. Bang! The 32nd bolt of heavenly thunder struck the Phoenix's raised head. The Buddhas knew that if another bolt of lightning struck, Phoenix would lose all 6 senses. There would be no Phoenix reincarnation in the 6 paths. Amitabha, the Venerable One, retracted his gaze and quietly put his palms together. Right at this moment, the Bodhi tree that had been erected outside the Buddhist gate for tens of thousands of years suddenly shook its branches. There was a rumbling sound. Everyone raised their heads and saw that on top of the supreme 33 layers of heaven, the majestic divine statue of Mount Meru appeared, surrounded by countless auspicious clouds. That was the brilliance of the Buddhas returning to their positions. Someone had become a Buddha. Becoming a Buddha without karma? This was the first thought that flashed through everyone's mind. Immediately after, the Buddhist light descended from the sky like a golden shield, firmly enveloping Phoenix. Venerable One, how could this be? Who dared to disobey the Buddha's order? Who is it? Who was the one who had become a Buddha? All the Buddhas looked at the Venerable One. Sitting on the golden lotus, the Venerable One opened his eyes again and looked at the dying Phoenix who was kneeling on the ground in the bronze ruins. Bang! The last clap of thunder struck the Buddha light. When he opened his eyes again, Phoenix was gone. Logically speaking, those who betrayed Buddhism were bound to be crushed into ashes. Moreover, Phoenix had even extracted her Buddhist bone, so it was impossible for her to escape to heaven. Unexpectedly, there was someone who gave all his gospel to Phoenix in less than a second after becoming a Buddha, in exchange for Phoenix's reincarnation. This was a huge variable. It was because of this variable that the Venerable One's eyes darkened. Venerable One? All the Buddhas turned around and frowned. There was some doubt in the Venerable One's eyes, but he did not say anything. He narrowed his eyes and walked toward Mountain Tenya. Among the 6 paths, only Buddhism could not do anything that went against the will of heaven. Since someone had taken the last clap of thunder for Phoenix, Buddhism could not be ruthless. However, no one knew who had attracted the Buddhist light from heaven before becoming a Buddha. The Venerable One seemed to have thought of something. When he was halfway up the stairs, he suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of Bodhi. There was no one there. The Venerable One's eyes narrowed, and he pinched his fingers to calculate. After losing his Buddha body, his eyes were always emitting a puzzling light. As if he had spied on the will of heaven, he chanted Amitabha with a smile and said to the empty lotus pond, Golden Lotus, go to the lower realm and meet Bodhi. As long as you have him, you can take Phoenix's fate. Phoenix owes him this. Phoenix is destined to be unable to escape this karma. When the time comes, you can become a Buddha again. Amitabha. Amidst the Sanskrit chants, the lotus pond shook, and the fate was set. It was just that even the venerable ones did not expect that there would be someone who would go to the mountain of Amitabha and kowtow 9,999 times just to make a great wish. It was a gentle and slender figure, wearing a white robe and pure black hair. He was as clean as the divine water between heaven and earth. In the heavy snow, he did not seem to know the cold at all. He took a step forward and knelt down. Because he had just suffered a clap of thunder, his jade-like fingers were still bleeding. The blood seeped into the glacier drop by drop as he knelt down. That year, the snow on Mountain Tenya was especially heavy. The divine bird swept across the sky and said to the person on the ground, "Bodhi, it's useless. Go back. As long as the true Buddha does not return, you will not be able to touch heaven and earth." The man smiled slightly, but did not stop. The divine bird heaved a long sigh and repeated, "It's useless. Otherwise, you can tell me what wish you have, and I will help you fulfill it." The man shook his head, still with a gentle smile on his face. However, no one understood. He kowtowed and crawled on the mountain road, not for the sake of cultivating the afterlife, only for the sake of freedom for that person. He shook the scripture tube and raised the wind horse, not for the sake of blessings, only for the sake of seeing that person once. Even when he became a Buddha, it was not for the sake of immortality. He wanted to bless her with peace and happiness. These divine birds could not do it. Only the true Buddha could fulfill his wish. He knelt down again. The man lowered his eyes, and the Bodhi leaves fell one after another. The divine bird looked at his back and gritted its teeth. "Why are you so stubborn? You are really a Bodhi tree." After saying this, the divine bird wanted to fly away. However, just as it flapped its wings, the 999th kowtow fell. On the snow mountain, the floating light gathered to form a reflection. That is, no one had ever seen the true Buddha. The Buddha's tribulation happened once every 10,000 years. If the true Buddha wanted to return to one, he had to clear the sea of blood. However, the six paths were in chaos now, and even Buddhism was somewhat abnormal. The true Buddha had long disappeared. But today he really appeared. No one has ever knelt down to the 999th step on the ice mountain. The Sanskrit voice sounded from the sky. The true Buddha lowered his eyes and whispered, "Bodhi, I know what you want, but you have to know that the emperor fell from heaven, abandoned the divine personality, and gave up reincarnation, all for the sake of the phoenix." Everyone thought that he tied the phoenix's red string to himself, but in fact, the phoenix did not have a red string to make him move. Chapter 834. Upon hearing this, the man raised his eyes. The true Buddha looked at him and continued, "He tied his red string to Phoenix so that Phoenix could win an incomplete marriage. In other words, in order to be together with Phoenix, he was willing to give himself up to Phoenix. You and Phoenix are destined to never be together. Why are you so persistent?" The man knelt and did not get up. His black hair was blown by the wind. He did not stop. Buddha also said that the marriage is incomplete. If there is reincarnation, is Phoenix destined to be alone? She is the ancient Phoenix. She is destined to return to Buddhism. Bodhi knew the answer from the Buddha's words. The man's voice was very low. He coughed and said, "Then I beg you to let Phoenix break away from her destiny and complete her marriage." The true Buddha's eyes were shocked. He looked at the man. "You knelt for 9,999 steps just to fulfill her wish. I know that I am also within the destiny." The man covered his chest. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. "But I hope that one day she will not be the only lonely existence in Buddhism. She is Phoenix. She should live a carefree life, like the person she likes, and do what she likes." The true Buddha looked at him without blinking. "Even if you will mistake her for someone else when you go down to the mortal world, you still want to do this?" "Yes." The man looked up. His eyes were as gentle as the snow water of Mountain Tenya. The true Buddha laughed. "Do you know what the 10,000 years calamity of Buddha is? The man shook his head. Once the true Buddha is destroyed, it will be difficult for the righteous path to return. The true Buddha looked at him and said, "You are the only Buddhist fate I have left in Mountain Tenya. Everyone who becomes a Buddha has to pass by you, but no one will stop to water you." Until the appearance of Phoenix, there was a change, and I saw hope. However, I never thought that you would use this method to wake me up. I don't have much time left. I have to avoid the Buddha's voice to tell you this, because I want you to know that when you go to the mortal world this time, the golden lotus will also reincarnate. According to the destiny, you have to be deceived and mistake her for Phoenix. Only then can you deceive Phoenix and win a chance of survival for Phoenix. Bodhi, everything has a cause and effect. Let me ask you one more time. Are you really willing to do this? The man nodded. His eyes were as clear as the moonlight. I'm willing. The true Buddha shook his head. Do you know what you're giving up? What you're giving up is the Buddha position that all living beings return to. You're giving up the possibility that she'll fall in love with you. Just to fulfill her wish? The Buddha asked. The man chuckled. I'm a Bodhi tree. Whether or not I'm the purest Buddhist fate in the world, it is because of her that I exist. I remember that when she was still young, she came to water me. All the gods and Buddhas advised her not to waste the divine water on me. She said that it was not a waste at all because in the world, within the 6 paths, countless golden lotuses bloomed, but there was only one Bodhi tree. This scene was unparalleled in the world. She gave me a name so that I am not just a lonely Bodhi tree. I know that she likes that man. Since she likes me, why shouldn't I fulfill her wish? The divine bird was listening at the side. It wanted to ask, what about you? If you give everything to her, what will you do? However, the man seemed to have never thought about this. His handsome and elegant face was like a sleeping prince. The true Buddha was moved. This is good too. You are Bodhi, and you have 108 Buddhist bones in your body. But these are not real. There is only one piece in the middle of your ribs. After you leave this place, I will take this piece of Bodhi Buddhist bone from you and use it to pave the way for the Phoenix's rebirth. You will forget everything that happened here and descend to the lower realm as a human, becoming a chess piece of fate. Only when the Phoenix regains her 6 senses will you regain this memory. The chanting gradually faded away. Thousands of years passed in the blink of an eye. Just like what was said in Destiny, Bodhi transformed into a human and met Ni Fong, who was disguised as the Phoenix Girl. At that time, he already had a ghost baby by his side. All this time, the ghost baby did not know what the man was looking for. There was no real brilliance in its eyes until Ni Fong called out that name, Jing Wu Shuang. The man smiled and reflected the ghost baby's face. Then, everything that Hellion Vivian experienced, until the Golden Lotus was resurrected and the Exorcist city went through the tribulation. Bang! The scythe pierced into the city from outside. The little king of hell held a pacifier in his mouth, and his whole body was suspended in midair. Under his feet was a snake demon that was about to become a demon. His black hair was very stylish from the wind. How dare you bite my face, damn it! My face can only be kissed by Little Hook. You are a furball. Get lost! The little king of hell waved his gigantic black axe. He was so vicious that few dared to provoke him. The demons did not expect him to appear here. Just as they were hesitating, they heard a thunderous sound in the city. They did not know what happened. Ni Fong stopped in her tracks and glanced outside the city. She said to the exorcist behind her in a gentle voice, I keep feeling that something is wrong. It's not normal. There should be a spy in the city. Did you see anything suspicious? A senior exorcist seemed to have thought of something. Yes, before I went to the Ni family, I saw a few people in disguise coming in from outside the city. They went to the Zhuge family. It has seemed strange that there are still people entering the city at this time. The Zhuge family? Ni Fong narrowed her eyes and frowned. She looked at Madame Zhuge, who was accompanying her. Annie, who are those people? Why did they enter the city at this time? Madame Zhuge did not expect the matter to be exposed so quickly. Her heart skipped a beat, but she answered naturally. They are just merchants who went to seek refuge. They are close to the Exorcist city, so they can't escape even if they want to. They can only enter the city. Is that so? An iPhone looked at Madame Zhuge and shook her head gently. She was very compassionate. I didn't want to do this at first. I know Annie cares about Brother Yun and wants to protect him. But look at the situation now. There are thousands of demons outside the city. We can't let any danger come to the Exorcist city. Now that Brother Yun has been possessed by a malicious spirit, I didn't expect him to enter the city in disguise and even hide in the Zhuge family mansion. Annie, you said that those people are merchants. Which merchants would disguise themselves before entering the mansion? As soon as an iPhone finished speaking, all the exorcists looked at Madame Zhuge and started to criticize her. Chapter 835. The Zhuge family is really foolish this time. She risked the lives of the entire exorcist city just to save her child. She doesn't look like a century-old exorcist family at all. Fortunately, Lady and I discovered it early. Otherwise, we would be in big trouble. This was exactly what an iPhone wanted. She looked up at Madame Zhuge and said, Annie, I have no choice but to do it now. Seniors, we have to tie Madame Zhuge up so that Zhuge Yun, who is hiding in the Zhuge family, can come out. Even if he is possessed by an evil spirit, he will be anxious when his family is in danger. Seniors, do you agree with this method? The reason why an iPhone asked this question was because she was confident that these exorcists would agree to it. As expected, almost everyone felt that this method was the most reliable. An iPhone did not waste any time and looked at Madame Zhuge again. She did not like to make any mistakes. However, it was not a good time to kill someone. Furthermore, from the looks of it, this old woman probably didn't know about her secret. There was nothing wrong with keeping her alive. With this, an iPhong's anxiety was greatly reduced and a gentle smile appeared on her face. Now, as long as she got rid of the disguised exorcist, she could officially become the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl and take away the fate of the Phoenix. Madame Zhuge did not resist, nor did she announce that she knew about the secret like the two exorcists who entered the city did. If it wasn't for Helian Weiwei's instructions before the operation, she might have done so. However, that person said that it was fine even if an iPhone found out. Keeping the secret would buy them more time. In fact, Helian Weiwei did not tell Madame Zhuge that the reason why she asked Madame Zhuge to keep quiet was to protect her life. Once anyone knew about an iPhong's secret, an iPhone would try her best to kill them. Helian Vivian had to ensure everyone's safety. However, when the disciples of the Zhuge family saw that Madame Zhuge was caught, they became anxious because no one knew when Helian Vivian and the rest would return. They had to save Madame Zhuge. However, right at this moment, the ground where the Ni family's demons were surrounding started to burn with a raging fire. Within the raging flames, Helian Vivian's closed eyes suddenly opened. She looked at Beligaju, who was standing in front of her. She strolled over. She was like a Greek goddess who had just come out of the arena. She had slender legs, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. Even under such circumstances, she was still so arrogant that it made people's hearts beat faster. Needless to say, she had the memories of her past life. The person standing in front of him now was not only Helian Vivian, but also Phoenix, whom he had once hurt. At that moment, Beligaju felt his heart twist into a ball. For some reason, he recalled that he had spent an entire day searching for the demonic mirror in the heavenly lake, only to be told that she had gone into seclusion for Bodhi. At that time, he was thinking that he should have held on to her tightly and not let go when she suggested breaking up, regardless of who she liked. Until now, Beligaju's thoughts had never changed. If she was really moved by Bodhi, he would tie her up immediately and let her know who she belonged to from the beginning to the end. Helian Vivian raised her head and looked at the man's handsome face. His deep peach blossom eyes, his looming demonic nature, and that familiar divinity. You're worried that I'll regain my memories of Buddhism because of Bodhi? Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows. As soon as she finished speaking, the man pulled her into his arms and squeezed her tightly. He was so tight that he used all his strength, as if he was afraid that she would leave at any time. However, he was very evil and domineering. When was I worried? It's just a Bodhi tree. How dare it take you away from me? Helian Vivian paused and felt the man's stiff fingers. Her lips curled up slightly. Since you're not worried about Bodhi, You're worried that I'll find out your original intention of getting close to me. You're taking revenge on me for not paying attention to you back then. That's why you're luring me." Bailey Jiaju looked at her with heavy eyes. In an instant, cracks appeared on the marble floor under his feet. The demons at the side trembled and immediately formed the shape of a goldfish. However, the man ignored them. He leaned down and put his thin lips on Hellion Vivian's ear. "Luring? Did I do that? I just used some methods to get you. You should be very clear about that." "Yes, I'm very clear about that. That's why I've decided to take you in, so that you won't harm others." Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and wrapped her arms around his neck. "But shouldn't you explain what's going on with those women around you?" Baligaju was stunned for a moment. The evil aura around him disappeared. He carried her up with a faint smile. "Not like that. Would you turn around and look at me?" At that time, one of them was the emperor of the heavenly Tao, while the other was the phoenix of Buddhism, who did whatever she wanted. In the beginning, they didn't see eye to eye and always wanted to conquer each other. Later on, they found out that they had already secretly fallen for each other when they first met. It was just that both of them were too young and arrogant at that time. They were used to not lowering their heads, so they were used to hiding everything in the bottom of their hearts. "So you didn't give the magic mirror to Jinlian?" Hellion Vivian let the man hug her. There was a smile in her eyes. Baligaju lowered his head and looked at her. "I'm not blind. Why would I give her the magic mirror? You should know about the memories reflected in the magic mirror. I'm just asking. After all, I'm not the kind of person who would throw away a token of love." Hellion Vivian smiled slyly. Baligaju raised his eyebrows. "I'm not the kind of person who would go to the forbidden area and kneel for 100 years for anyone other than you." Hellion Vivian. This sentence was too lethal. She was actually speechless. "Shouldn't you give in to me a little?" Hellion Vivian complained softly. "Why are you still so sharp-tongued?" Baligaju looked at the furry head in his arms and bent down to hug her. He said in a low voice, "You don't know what I was thinking when you walked out just now. I was thinking that if you were a little naughty, I would crush your claws so that you wouldn't still be thinking about that Bodhi tree." "You've long remembered the past?" Hellion Vivian wasn't asking. Instead, she was stating. Baligaju laughed softly. "Not very long ago, after entering the tomb, I thought of some fragments. These fragments were from the heavenly Tao. They were very messy and fragmented. However, these aren't important anymore. What's important is how those Buddhists treated you back then. I'm going to get them all back, bit by bit." Chapter 836. At this moment, a large number of exorcists rushed out from the center of the exorcist city. They were not there to fend off the demons outside the city. Instead, they were all wearing white robes and holding long swords surrounding the Zhuge mansion. An Ai Feng stood at the front of the group of exorcists, looking at the tightly shut iron gate of the Zhuge mansion through the veil. She glanced at the disciple of the Ni family beside her. The disciple did not say anything else. He dragged Madame Zhuge, who was tied to the side, over and shouted at the Zhuge manor, "Zhuge Yun, Madame Zhuge has disregarded the safety of the entire exorcist city for you. Are you going to hide in the Zhuge manor like a coward?" Madame Zhuge knew that Ni Feng had done all this on purpose. She did not say anything and just stood there with a cold look in her eyes. Ni Feng was very polite. She looked at the disciple of the Ni family and said, "Don't talk like this in the future." Then, she looked at Madame Zhuge and said, "Annie, Brother Yun has been controlled by a malicious spirit. I have to find him. Otherwise, I will be irresponsible to the people of the exorcist city. I know you will blame me, but at this point I can't care so much. Please forgive me, Annie." Her words were not meant for Madame Zhuge, but for the exorcists who were following behind her. Today's matter must be bloody. When Zhuge Yun and the rest came out later, they would definitely reveal her secret. If she did not say anything in advance, it would inevitably arouse suspicion. As long as she continued to deepen the impression that Zhuge Yun had been possessed by the malicious spirit, all she did was to protect the exorcist city. Even if Zhuge Yun and the rest had the chance to say something, no one would believe them. Because in people's minds, it was just the malicious spirit's instigation. Even if these exorcists did not think so, she would still lead them in that direction. If she did not think of a way to kill all the people who had entered the ancient tomb, her secret would be in danger of being exposed. Zhuge Yun and the rest must not be left alive. At the thought of this, Anai Feng narrowed her eyes and deliberately lowered her status. Annie, don't worry. As long as Brother Yun doesn't do anything overboard, everything will be fine. Sure enough, after seeing Anai Feng's attitude, the crowd supported her even more. Feng there's no need to say so much to the Zhuge family. As one of the 4 major factions, she even forgot the most basic rules of an exorcist. Just do whatever you want to do. We'll support you. Yes. An elder from another faction also spoke up. He looked at Madame Zhuge and kept shaking his head. I never thought that the Zhuge family would become like this. When Brother Zhuge was still alive, how could he tolerate having a demon in his family? Since he was possessed by an evil spirit, he should deal with it as soon as possible. How could he be an exorcist when he risked the lives of the entire city? Madame Zhuge had no way to explain herself in front of the crowd. Inside the Zhuge manor, a few exorcists had joined forces to hold Zhuge Yun back, preventing him from leaving. Yun, you can't go. Yes, young master. Before Madame left, she instructed that no matter what happens, you can't go out. Zhuge Yun, have you forgotten what Miss Wei said before she left? You have to try your best to buy time. Don't let Anai Feng find out anything. Zhuge Yun bit his lip hard. His eyes were red. Stay here. I'll go out by myself. I can't let these people slander my mother and tarnish the reputation of the Zhuge family for generations. But what can you do if you go out? You heard it just now. Now all the exorcists in the exorcist city are on Anai Feng's side. Whatever she says is the truth. Even if you go out, you won't be able to change the current situation. Someone growled at Zhuge Yun and pressed his hand on his shoulder. Anai Feng is cunning. We were all fooled by her in the tomb. If it weren't for Miss Wei, we wouldn't have known that she dared to fake her identity as the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. Now that you're out, I don't know what she'll do to you. Zhuge Yun's eyes were pure black and sharp. Even so, I can't let her be so unscrupulous. Even if I go out, I'll tear off her hypocritical mask and let everyone know what kind of woman she is. Zhuge Yun, the exorcists saw that they couldn't stop him. They looked at the back of the figure walking toward the door and gritted their teeth. Wait, we'll go with you. As exorcists, for a long time, they had forgotten why they promised their father when they were young that they would protect the righteous and ward off evil. They didn't know when it started, but the exorcist city was no longer as simple as it used to be. The cooperation between the sects in the past had turned into a struggle for power. As exorcists, they had to consider how they could best protect the interests of their families by focusing on exorcism. However, now for the first time, they found the purest impulse. They wanted to break these unknown rules and tell everyone what the truth was. They wanted to be a true protector of the righteous and ward off evil. Bang! The door was pushed open with a heavy hand. Zhuge Yun stood there, his eyes met with Anai Feng's. His voice was cold. Anai Feng, didn't you want to look for me? Now that I'm out, let my mother go. Anai Feng seemed to be shocked by his appearance. She deliberately patted her chest and coughed twice before saying weakly, Brother Yun is really possessed by a malicious spirit. Otherwise, why would he be so resentful towards me? Annie, is this why you didn't say anything and protected Brother Yun in the Zhuge manor? Unfortunately, his violence is so obvious. The seniors are here too. They won't let him go on like this. Enough. A few voices came from behind Zhuge Yun. The exorcists who had been to the ancient tomb lined up in front of the Zhuge manor. Every one of them was wearing a white exorcist robe. They looked at Anai Feng with cold eyes. Every one of us is standing in front of you, safe and sound. You keep saying that we're possessed by evil spirits because you're afraid that we'll reveal your secret. Anai Feng, do you really think that you can control the entire exorcist city? The moment the exorcist came out, Anai Feng felt that things were a little tricky. She was worried that something had happened. However, when she looked around and didn't see Phoenix, she smiled in her heart. She thought that they had some tricks up their sleeves and dared to challenge her. In fact, they had nothing. They were just a bunch of stupid humans. Since she could make all the exorcists in the exorcist city listen to her, she was naturally well prepared. Chapter 837. Ni Feng thought so in her heart, but she did not show it on her face. Instead, she coughed heavily and said softly, "I've never done anything like I did in the exorcist city. The Ni family doesn't need to do these things. You bunch of malicious spirits, you've underestimated the seniors in the exorcist city. Although I don't know what kind of spirit possessed you, what I'm doing now is for the sake of the people of the exorcist city. If Madame Zhuge disagrees, I can even hand over the sovereignty of the exorcist city to her. Is this the only way to stop your tricks of sowing discord?" Ni Feng's move of retreating in order to advance was well executed. It was so good that even if Madame Zhuge were to say anything now, it would be regarded as a power grab. The elders naturally believed her even more. Everyone shouted, "Feng, you want to hand over the sovereignty of the exorcist city? How can you do that? You're the Phoenix girl. You're the only one who can save the exorcist city now." "That's right, Miss Ni. You can't just fall into their trap like this. You'll only hurt your loved ones and delight your enemies. There are also disciples of the Li family in there. But now, I understand that there are only a few people who can come back alive from the ancient tomb. If they weren't possessed by malicious spirits, it's impossible for them to appear here. Every word they say is to sow discord. It's not only us, but also these malicious spirits and demons know that the only person who can change the fate of the exorcist city is the Phoenix girl. That's why they're targeting Feng. What a good trick." In the midst of Ni Feng's coughing, the crowd chimed in one after another. No one spoke for Zhuge Yun and the others. Almost everyone was on Ni Feng's side. Seeing this, Zhuge Yun clenched his fists and could not help but shout, "Ni Feng, she's not the Phoenix girl at all? Seniors, you've all been deceived by her." There was a moment of silence, but that silence did not last long. The disciples of the Ni family widened their eyes at Zhuge Yun. "Do you know what you're saying? Our eldest miss has been blessed since she was born. She's full of spiritual energy and has the heart of a bodhisattva. If it weren't for her, those demons would have attacked long ago. Who is there to talk nonsense here?" Ni Feng shook her head and reached out to stop the Ni family's disciple. She pretended to be sad and said, "You don't have to say any more. The seniors are all thoughtful and can clearly distinguish between what is real and what is fake. Feng, don't worry. Although we're old, we can still see clearly. We know that everything you've done is for the sake of the exorcist city. Besides, how can you not be the Phoenix girl? These words are simply nonsense. You don't have to take it to heart." Seniors. Zhuge Yun knew that if he didn't say anything, they wouldn't have another chance. He took a step forward and shouted, "You can choose not to believe me, Zhuge Yun, but there are 6 of us here. All 6 of us have been to the ancient tomb. Every one of us knows what happened in the ancient tomb. Ni Feng was a corpse from the very beginning. She had already died more than 10 years ago when she had that serious illness. Ni Biao used a forbidden spell to raise a human from a corpse for the sake of the Ni family's honor. That was how Ni Feng came to be today. Ni Biao's ambition killed him because he didn't know when Ni Feng had learned to absorb his spiritual energy. After entering the ancient tomb, he was bewitched and turned into a demon. All of this was because Ni Feng wanted to achieve true immortality. In addition to the Saraira, there was also a magic mirror in the ancient tomb. After Ni Feng obtained the magic mirror, she returned to the city ahead of us. In order to keep her secret, she told you in advance that everyone in the ancient tomb was possessed so that no one would believe what we said. In fact, she was the only one who was truly evil. In the face of Zhuge Yun's accusation, not only did Ni Feng not show a trace of panic, but she also gently shook her head. She heaved a long sigh and coughed pitifully. "This is what you want to do, isn't it? Pour all the dirty water on me, then make me disappear? Once I disappear, the exorcist city's spiritual energy shield will disappear. At that time, you can destroy the entire exorcist city from the inside out." At this point, Ni Feng looked up and declared righteously, "I won't let you get away with it, you malicious spirits who are trying to stir up discord." Hearing Ni Feng's words, The exorcists were terrified. They could almost imagine what kind of scene it would be. Many people started to riot. We shouldn't have given these malicious ghosts a chance to speak. Isn't it because the young master of the Zhuge family and the young master of the Li family are in there? If it were anyone else, they would have been captured. These malicious ghosts are vicious. Even I almost believed them when they thought of such a plan. Malicious ghosts are cunning by nature. They're the best at reading people's minds. Lady and I is already very tired from dealing with them. It's really not easy for her to protect the exorcist city. Zhuge Yun listened to the discussions around him in disbelief. He could not even believe his ears. He had already made it so clear, but these people still thought that he was lying. Why can't they use their brains to think about it? If they were really possessed by ghosts, would they still be saying so much here? Perhaps this was human nature. Even he was the same. He would always force his own opinion on something that was obvious. He was used to being instigated by others and was unwilling to spend time thinking about the truth. He believed that what he supported must be right, and would even use malicious words to hurt the person who was right. For a moment, Zhuge Yun did not know whether to feel sorry for himself or for this phenomenon. But he knew that no matter what, he could not back down. And iPhone, you know very well whether I'm telling the truth or not. Zhuge Yun's eyes were clear. Today, I will stand here with the other 6 friends and swear to the heavens that you are not the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl. If there is a single lie, my Zhuge family will never have peace. At this time, Madame Zhuge also spoke. Her eyes were as firm as water. I believe in Yun'er. There are too many suspicious points. We can't conclude what happened in the tomb just based on the words of one person. Everyone wants to protect the city. This is the home of the exorcist tribe. No one wants to destroy it. It's just that at this time, we can't be used by others. And iPhone heard this and lowered her eyes as if she had suffered a blow. Her voice was soft, and her beautiful eyes were filled with tears. I really didn't expect that even Annie would only look at me. Is it because I want to catch Brother Yin that Annie is so aggressive? Hostile ghosts have always been prying into people's hearts. That's why I was wary of them from the beginning. I didn't expect that even these precautions would become their means of attacking me. It's no wonder that Auntie misunderstood. But Annie, have you ever thought that if I'm really not the Phoenix Girl, how can I hold up such a spiritual energy shield? Moreover, up until now, these hostile ghosts have only accused me, but have not the slightest evidence to prove that I'm not the Phoenix Girl. Annie, I don't want the unity between us to be torn apart because of hostile ghosts. Can you understand how I feel right now? An iPhone, the so-called spiritual energy shield you're talking about, is just the corpse aura on your body. You want evidence, don't you? Now, the demons from the 3 realms are arriving at the exorcist city one after another, but they haven't done anything. It's not because of the spiritual energy shield, but because they have never thought of attacking the city. The reason why the exorcist city is surrounded is inside the city. As long as we can't stop an iPhone and find a way to break this corpse aura shield, the exorcist city will become a real hell on earth. All the exorcists in the exorcist city will be sucked dry of their spiritual energy in an instant. Those demons know that this place is going to become a purgatory, which is why they're surrounding the city. It's said that the Phoenix Girl is a phoenix born from fire. The real reincarnated Phoenix Girl can let the Buddha aura shine and show the Dharma form of the Phoenix. An iPhone, since you were young, the title of the reincarnated Phoenix Girl was given by the Ni family, but in fact, you've never shown the Dharma form of the Phoenix. Do you still dare to say that you're the Phoenix Girl? Now that all the seniors in the exorcist city are here, if you're really the Phoenix Girl, cast your spell and show everyone who's lying. This was the first time Zhuge Yun's thoughts were so clear. Perhaps it was because he was influenced by Hellion Vivian in the ancient tomb. He was not like before, who panicked whenever something happened. Instead, he peeled off the layers one by one, then cut to the core. After hearing his words, the exorcists fell into their own thoughts. After all, Zhuge Yun was right. Feng, or had never shown her Dharma form, even once. Looking at the calm expressions of the senior exorcists, Zhuge Yun knew that his words had worked. And Feng was not the Phoenix Girl, and she would never show the Dharma form of the Phoenix. When the time came, everyone would naturally be able to see her true face. However, Zhuge Yun did not expect an iPhone to speak again at this time. Because I'm the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl, my body has been weaker than the average person since I was young, so I tried my best to avoid showing my Dharma form. My father knows this too, so he's usually the one to subdue the ghosts. I shouldn't have done this, but today is a day of life and death for the Exorcist City, so there's nothing wrong with using a trace of my true blood to prove myself. Chapter 838. Eldest Miss. Hearing Ni Feng's words, the disciples of the Ni family were all moved. Even the elders of the Exorcist clan looked guilty. Feng, you don't have to force yourself too much. Everyone knows about your physical condition. Uncles and aunts, Feng, knows that you feel sorry for me. But since Brother Yun has already suggested it, if I don't do anything, the malicious spirit will really succeed. After Feng finished speaking, she coughed a few times gently, as if her body was very weak. Seeing this, the Exorcist elders could not help but feel a little angry. If Feng can reveal the light of Buddha and create the Phoenix Dharma, then arrest everyone in the Zhuge manor. This is only fair to Feng. Even if Feng can't reveal the Dharma, this is my fault alone. Why do you have to include others? Of course, Zhuge Yun was not convinced. He only felt that the whole thing was too much. These Exorcist elders were completely deceived by Feng. No matter what happened, they subconsciously defended Feng. Should it be said that the word Phoenix had a deep influence on the Exorcist clan? Things were not as Zhuge Yun thought. Elder Zhang looked at him and said, "If you are wrong and we don't arrest everyone in the Zhuge family, how are we going to stabilize the hearts of the people in the Exorcist City? If we simply let go of everyone who questioned the Phoenix, then wouldn't the Exorcist City be even more chaotic? Yun, you are the heir of the Zhuge family. You have to bear the consequences of your words. In the Exorcist City, no one can hide the truth from the masses. Since we agreed to your request to let Feng prove her innocence by revealing the light of Buddha and creating the Dharma, then you should pay the corresponding price." This was indeed the rule of the Exorcist City. And Feng knew this rule because she knew about it. That was why she concluded that he would not agree. Zhuge Yun gritted his teeth. If it was just him, it would not matter. But to let him gamble with the entire Zhuge family, hesitation appeared on Zhuge Yun's face. The young man's mind was still too worried. "We agree." Madame Zhuge walked out from behind him. Her hands were still tied, but her manner was indescribable. Yun, the Zhuge family has always done things with a clear conscience. We knew the truth, but we didn't dare to reveal it. It is not the Zhuge family style to let the evildoers wreak havoc in the Exorcist City. Let them begin. The Zhuge family is not afraid of being caught, let alone being threatened. As if they were shocked by Madame Zhuge's words, the group of young children stood up one after another. They were still very young because the Zhuge family had declined early. Although they were born in a family of exorcists, they had never been worshipped like the Ni family. But even so, the young teenagers had learned some principles from a young age, such as protecting. Zhuge Yun's eyes reddened as he looked at his brothers. The rest of the exorcists also stood up and expressed that they would live and die with the Zhuge family. Zhuge Yun raised his head again. He already had a hero in him. "All right, we will do as Mother said." The Zhuge family agrees to these conditions. Now, Feng, shouldn't you begin to manifest the light of Buddha and shape the Dharma? Feng narrowed her eyes. She did not expect the Zhuge family to be so capable. However, did they think that they could expose her like this? If it was in the past, they could, but it was different now. Although she was not the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl, she was the golden lotus before Buddha. As the Buddha girl, although she could not completely resurrect and regain the Buddha's position, it was easy for her to manifest the light of Buddha. Feng smiled faintly and looked at Madame Zhuge. She pretended to be troubled and said, "I didn't want to do this at first. I only wanted to lock up these people who were possessed by the evil ghost temporarily and release them when the city is safe. Since Annie insists, I have no choice but to do so." As she spoke, Feng put her palms together and chanted. She moved her fingertips and waved her long sleeves. A steady stream of spiritual energy slowly flowed out. Almost everyone could feel the auspicious aura emanating from her body. They felt refreshed and refreshed. Then, a ray of light of Buddha descended from the sky and shrouded her in the center. From afar, she looked like a fairy who had descended in person. Even her fingers were shining. The faint light formed a pattern behind her. It was the sound of fireworks and Sanskrit. No one could deny that it was the Dharma of Buddha. Only those who had the fate of Buddha could do this. How could this be? It shouldn't be like this. Zhuge Yun's heart began to sink. He turned around and looked at his companions behind him. Everyone had the same expression. When they were in the ancient tomb, Ni Feng's body was only filled with corpse energy. How could she have the light of Buddha and manifest the Dharma of Buddha? Zhuge Yun took a heavy step back. He raised his head and looked at Ni Feng, who was smiling. He instantly understood. He had fallen into her trap. Was he really going to let Ni Feng get away with it? Zhuge Yun clenched his fists. Why was he so useless? He had expected the result. With the Dharma of Buddha, those people would only worship Ni Feng more. She had deliberately played along with his words. Sure enough, when the seniors of the exorcist city saw the light of Buddha, they widened their eyes and looked at the scene in shock. When Ni Feng withdrew the Dharma, they all regained their senses. Only then did they regain their senses. All of them exclaimed in admiration. So this is the Phoenix Dharma idol. The heavens are really protecting our exorcising tribe. To be able to witness such a scene in my lifetime, I'm willing to die. It's hard on Feng Mer. She's the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl, but she's always been doubted. Someone looked at Ni Feng with heartache. Ni Feng coughed softly, as if she had no strength to speak. It's okay. As long as I can put everyone at ease and protect the exorcist city, it's not a big deal for me to do this. Feng, stop talking. You should rest first. After old Zhang finished speaking, he suddenly looked at Zhuge Yun. What else do you have to say now? Do you still want to say that Feng, is a fake? Yun, you've really disappointed me. Even if you go to the underworld, you'll be letting your father down. Ni Feng tugged at old Zhang's sleeve. Uncle Zhang, don't blame Brother Yun. He's also been possessed by a malicious spirit. That's why he came up with such a vicious plan. However, it's probably because he's been possessed for too long. It's difficult to help him regain his consciousness. What do you mean by regain his consciousness? The disciples of the Ni family shouted. If he's possessed by a malicious spirit, he should be killed on the spot. But the Zhuge family is so protective of him. Now that he's stirred up trouble, we can't just arrest him and let it go. Zhuge Yun, you instigating malicious spirit, have a taste of our swords. In a flash, 5 to 6 people raised their swords and stabbed at Zhuge Yun. Right at this moment, a slender, fair hand clasped the wrist of one of the disciples who was holding the sword. The strength was so great that he couldn't even move an inch. Chapter 839. It's Miss Wei. Zhuge Yun's eyes lit up with unspeakable excitement. The other exorcists also stopped what they were doing. Their eyes were shining brightly, as if they had come back to life. They were so bright that it was piercing. Ah! The disciple suddenly screamed in pain. He bent his knees and looked at the person who was holding his wrist. Who are you? Helian Wei Wei chuckled. Her features were delicate and pretty. Her aura was brilliant and scorching. Her tall and slender figure stood against the light, as if a queen had arrived in person. Who am I? Your eldest miss who wants to disguise herself, as the Phoenix girl, knows very well. You dare to slander the lady. You're really with Zhuge Yun? The disciple wanted to get up. However, Helian Vivian narrowed her eyes and looked at him sharply. Black, hold him down. Following her low roar, a huge black shadow emerged from the fog, shaking its black fur, as if it could crush everything, pouncing towards that disciple. What is that? Everyone's eyes widened. Only now did they see the huge black shadow clearly. It was a black demon dog. Just its claws alone could crush 4 or 5 people in an instant. Those sharp claws were incomparably dangerous. Its scarlet eyes made it look like an emissary from hell. It was as if as long as they moved slightly, it could take their lives. Everything happened so fast that they did not even have the chance to fight back. The Peachwood sword was thrown aside. They could even smell the dangerous aura coming from the black dog. The few disciples from the Ni family who wanted to attack Zhuge Yun could only be described as fear. They had never seen such a huge demon dog. Moreover, this demon dog was not even afraid of the Peachwood sword and the spiritual energy on their bodies. It was as if it could bite them into pieces if it lowered its head. What made them even more scared was that such a huge demonic creature actually retracted its claws at a casual command from the other party. "All right, you can come back now." Hellion Vivian smiled. The black demon dog immediately stood to her right. Its long and black hair exuded the evil from the depths of the earth's crust. An endless stream of black fog was emitted from its body. It was as if as long as one was looked at by its blood-red eyes, one would die in the next moment. However, the man with the fluttering robe stood in front of it with a smile on his face, as if he was the master who could tame all the demons in the world. The whole street of the Exorcist City was dead silent. No one dared to take a step forward. The senior exorcists felt an unprecedented threat. They stared at Hellion Vivian and asked, "What kind of demon are you? Monster?" Hellion Vivian chuckled, her eyes filled with mockery. She ignored the exorcists and looked into Ni Feng's shaking eyes. "You must be very disappointed that I'm still alive, Miss Ni." Ni Feng's panic only lasted for a moment. She quickly regained her composure. So what if this woman was still alive? Without the Buddha bone, she was nothing. She thought that she was still the phoenix who could clear the sea of blood and see through the 6 paths TSK. She was no longer. She was just a mortal that she could crush with one hand. She wanted to go against her with just a mortal body? Without the memories of the phoenix, she was not even worth mentioning. Even if she recovered her spiritual aura, it would still be the same. An iPhone raised her eyes and said in a clear voice, "I don't know what you're talking about. However, our Exorcist City will not allow any demon to exist. Since you've come in, don't even think about leaving." "When did I say that I wanted to leave?" Hellion Vivian looked at her lazily and evilly. "I won't leave until I destroy your soul." An iPhone was not afraid of her. She twisted the truth and said, "So you're the mastermind behind all this." "Those malicious spirits also listened to your instructions and tried their best to slander me. You planned to join the Zhuge family from the beginning, didn't you? Now that I think about it, you didn't join any of the exorcist families but chose to join the Zhuge family just so that you could carry out your plan better. You knew that the Zhuge family had a deep grudge against our Ni family. Compared to other senior exorcists who had a pure state of mind, the Zhuge family would be more easily bewitched and manipulated by you. It was a good plan. Unfortunately, I showed the Buddha's light and Dharma, so your trick was useless. The one who lost in the end is still you." After hearing Ni Feng's words, curses were heard all around. So that's how it is. The Zhuge family's hearts have been eaten by dogs. They just let the demon control them and slandered Lady Ni indiscriminately. Just catching them and locking them up is not enough to appease my hatred. Such people should not stay in the Exorcist City. Saying that Lady Ni is a lie. I think the Zhuge family is just jealous. They are jealous that the Ni family is stronger than the Zhuge family. All of this is because of this demon. Bewitching people is not a good thing. Lady Ni, there is no need to talk to such a person. Just fight her. We have so many people. We are afraid of just a few of them. There are no demons in the Exorcist City, let alone the Zhuge family, who takes in demons. I feel disgusted just by killing them. The hurtful words poured into Zhuge Yun's ears. He clenched his fists even tighter. He wanted to rush over, but was stopped by Hellion Vivian. Unlike Zhuge Yun, Hellion Vivian just stood there and glanced around casually. Her voice was indifferent. "Are you guys done?" Everyone was irritated by her attitude and gritted their teeth. Hellion Wei Wei smiled and said, "You guys like to be used by others, but I don't like to let imposters jump around here." As she spoke, she looked at an iPhone. Her eyes were clear and sharp, and her long hair fluttered in the wind. "Golden Lotus, you want to impersonate me with your Buddhist aura." Chapter 840. Hearing the words Golden Lotus. An iPhone abruptly raised her eyes. The gentleness on her face was gone. You impossible. This is impossible. Phoenix will never regain her memories. Back then, the Venerable One had said that as long as Bodhi recognized her wrongly, he would do everything possible to protect her, and the true Phoenix would never exist. This is destiny. Phoenix will never be able to escape from this destiny. Why? Why is this happening? And iPhone still could not believe it. She tried her best to maintain her emotions. However, Hellion Vivian did not give her the chance. She stood in the middle of the crowd, her long robe fluttering and her black hair flying in the wind. She straightened her right hand with great force, the coldness in her eyes penetrating to the bone. An invisible air current instantly surrounded her on both sides, like a natural barrier that emitted a bright light, isolating all the turbid air 10 feet away from her. It was as if something was surging out from the depths of the earth's crust. It was fire, the fire of hell that could burn everything. The exorcists looked over and their eyes widened. It was as if they were shocked by another world. Within the flames, the shadow of Mount Bujo could be vaguely seen, the chaotic scene of demons dancing together, the four seas filled with blood, and the demon eye mountain that countless gods and Buddhas could not do anything about. The narration that was only seen in books, they did not expect to see it right in front of their eyes. Everyone's expression was indescribable. Other than shock and astonishment, there was only disbelief. Opening the gate of hell was something that even gods could not do. However, from within the blazing hellfire, a slender and evil figure walked out. The sound of footsteps seemed to be enough to freeze the air. The man's black hair was like the night sky, setting off that outstanding, arrogant face, with a handsomeness that looked down on everything. Black cheese spread out from his surroundings. It was actually something that hundreds of demons couldn't compare to. Behind him, it was as if there were thousands of demons surging and clamoring, but none of them dared to go past the man. And Ai Feng's face turned completely pale. She took a heavy step back. You Emperor, it's impossible. This is impossible. You can't still have consciousness. You've fallen from heaven. She had roared out the last sentence. However, this person had never existed in His Highness' eyes, and he didn't even want to pay attention to her. Of course, he would let the little thing play to its heart's content later. He would smash this rotten lotus in front of him into pieces. He had mentioned how the Buddhists had dealt with his little phoenix. He was going to get back at them bit by bit. And iPhone did not dare to look into the man's eyes, especially those deep and charming eyes that were now filled with disgust. He shouldn't look at her like that. She had liked him for thousands of years. Even the Venerable One said that they should be the ones destined for marriage. Back then, when he went to Buddhism for the first time, she already had 6 thoughts. One of them turned into a demoness in the lower realm just to wait for him to appear. This man was supposed to be hers. All his eyes should be on her. Instead of using such focused and gentle eyes to look at a phoenix who only knew how to fight and kill all day long, that woman had only attracted his attention by playing hard to get. Why? Why should a phoenix have him? An iPhone turned her head and looked at Hellion Vivian as if she was looking at an enemy. Hellion Vivian just chuckled. Jinlian, I'll show you what the real phoenix Dharma form is. As she spoke, she waved her palm and her clothes moved with the fire. In my name, I call the wind and clouds of the world, adjust the fire of hell, save thousands of lives, and become the true Buddha of Sakya. Phoenix Bone Knife, return to your position. As soon as she finished speaking, a loud bang was heard. The invisible gas gathered in the center of her palm, and a huge whirlpool stirred up the entire Bujo Mountain. Hellion Vivian stood in the center of the whirlpool without dodging. Her eyes were like torches, and her robe fluttered. Several rays of light burst out from her back, forming a golden phoenix that flew in flames. The airflow was surging with flames, and a huge machete rose from the sea of blood. It seemed to have a murderous aura, and it slashed all the evil spirits along the way. It flew straight into Hellion Vivian's palm. That's Demon Slayer Curse. The curse of our exorcist tribe. Could she be the real Phoenix Girl? The exorcists who wanted to punish Zhuge Yun were all dumbfounded. The peachwood swords in their hands fell to the ground. They could not believe that the reincarnation of the Phoenix girl that they had recognized for so many years was a fake. What's wrong with you? Elder Zhang was the most distressed. He was so regretful that his intestines turned green. At this time, an iPhone could no longer hear his questions. The aura was getting stronger and stronger. She could only resist it by holding up the Buddhist aura. Seeing that she did not speak, Elder Zhang knew that this matter was settled. When he looked at the young people who were thought to be possessed by evil spirits, he felt a burning pain on his face. It was not only Elder Zhang. Those exorcists who had cursed the Zhuge family wanted to dig a hole and bury themselves in it. They did not even dare to think about what they had said, because that would only prove their stupidity. The Phoenix girl was originally the deity that they had to protect for their entire lives. However, they worshipped the fake Phoenix girl and treated the real Phoenix girl as a monster. The exorcists who were besieging the Zhuge family lowered their heads at the words regret. When Ni Feng saw this, she laughed loudly. Her voice was like heavy Sanskrit, echoing in everyone's ears. Phoenix, do you think that you can come back to life with the help of the Emperor to attract the fire of hell? Without the light of Buddha, you can't form a Buddha's body. Do you think I don't know? The Buddha's bones in your body have been extracted long ago. You can't break out of your shell. Poor Phoenix, do you think you won? You were destined to lose when you turned your back on Buddhism back then. You can't escape your fate. You'll always be a sharp blade of Buddhism. Ha 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 ha. The maniacal laughter echoed throughout the entire exorcist city. Ni Feng's expression had changed. She no longer looked harmless, but sinister and ruthless. Soon, your Dharma form will be taken away by me. Even the Emperor won't be able to stop it. This is God's will. Phoenix, even if you were once the leader of all Buddhas, what can you do about God's will? You're destined not to be favored by the true Buddha. However, what an iPhone did not expect was, right at this moment, a string of Bodhi that emitted light rose from Zhuge Yun's body and turned the evil spirit in the air into nothing. Chapter 841. In an instant, huge waves surged like a sea of blood. The light of Buddha descended from the sky, splitting the bloody clouds and reaching straight to hell. Celestial birds flew in the sky and lotuses bloomed. On top of the exorcist city, surrounded by demons, the majestic statue of Mount Meru appeared. It was like a Buddhist land with boundless lotuses. It was just like the scene when Phoenix broke out of its shell. In the strong wind, Hellion Vivian stood against the light, holding her scimitar. The light of Buddha wrapped around her body inch by inch, forming the image of Buddha, eradicating all injustice in the world, eradicating all sins in the world. The supreme form of Trayastrimsa heaven. Phoenix's howl echoed from all directions. An iPhone took a step back, her eyes widening. It's Bodhi. Did he leave his real body of Buddha behind just to attract the 1,000 feet of Buddha's light? How dare he lie to me? No. He obviously thought that I was you. How could there be a piece of Buddha's bone outside? It shouldn't be like this. An iPhone hugged her head in pain. Looking at Hellion Vivian in front of her, her eyes turned red. She recalled the time when she was in Buddhism. Phoenix was also so murderous. Her scimitar fell and cut off her Buddha's body, making her suffer for 100 years before she could be reborn. However, after being hurt by Phoenix's scimitar, she still could not get back the Buddha's position that once belonged to her. For a long time, she could only wait for Bodhi to find a way to resurrect her. Everything went according to plan. Bodhi mistook her for someone else. She began to formulate a flawless plan. But now, an iPhone realized that she was being used by Subhuti. From the beginning, Bodhi's real body of Buddha was not with him at all. Moreover, why would a Bodhi attract such a strong light of Buddha? Even she might not be able to do that. But Bodhi's Buddha's bone had the power to penetrate hell. This was her biggest miscalculation. No matter how pathetic an iPhone was, Hellion Vivian would not let her go. The Phoenix's body of Buddha was reborn faster than before. In the blink of an eye, in a flash, she appeared in front of an iPhone. A loud bang was heard. His long leg came down heavily. An iPhone wanted to block the attack with her Buddha's light, but the moment she raised her hand, she was kicked a meter away. His internal organs were all in pain, regardless of whether she was the Golden Lotus or the young lady of the NI family. She had always been pampered by others and had never suffered the slightest bit. Only this phoenix, this damned woman. An iPhone jumped up and was about to fight back. But her speed was nothing compared to Phoenix's, who was extremely powerful in the Six Paths. She didn't know if it was because she had spent too much time with His Highness. In the past, Hellion Vivian was the one who liked to end battles quickly. She was the one who killed people with one shot. He had actually learned how to torture people in combat. As long as NI Phone raised her head, her leg would follow suit. NI Phone clutched her chest and spat out mouthfuls of blood. She sneered. So what if you kill me? I still have Buddha's fate. As long as there are lotuses in this world, I can be resurrected. Phoenix, although you're an immortal bird, I'm the golden lotus in front of Buddha. As long as Buddhism is not destroyed, I can live for another day. When that time comes, I'll take revenge for everything that I've suffered today. When she said that, it took a lot of effort for her to do so, but she still had that vicious thought in her mind. Hellion Vivian smiled, but her expression was cold. Do whatever you want. As long as I'm having a good time, it doesn't matter to me whether you come out in the future. I'm going to beat you anyway. You. Her attitude made NI Phone even angrier. She was so angry that she could not breathe properly. She clenched her teeth and wanted to pounce on Hellion Vivian and bite her to death. Hellion Vivian did not waste any more time with her and kicked her again. NI Feng's face rolled through the dust. Blood stuck to her face, and she could barely open her eyes. She looked at the godlike man in a daze. Emperor, do you want Phoenix like this? She's so vicious. And you still want her? You obviously don't like this kind of woman. Upon hearing this, Bailey Jiaju glanced at her. However, his gaze was like an ice sword in a cold river, so cold that it made people want to run away. I like to see your hands stained with blood. As Baligaju spoke, he took Hellion Vivian's hand and kissed it. He chuckled and asked, Are you done? Hellion Vivian nodded. She felt that His Highness was not a simple person when he smiled. Baligaju squeezed her hand and said calmly, Forget it. Your way of teaching people a lesson will never be presentable. Zhuge Yun thought that he was really instigated by NI Phone when he said that. He did not expect that the next sentence would be, You hit her too lightly. Zhuge Yun's throat moved. He looked at NI Feng's face that was stained with blood. This was too light? She was just short of beating her to death. The thoughts of the gods were indeed incomprehensible to mortals like them. Bailey Jiaju casually continued to speak to Hellion Wei. Because I never hit a woman, it's not good for me to set a good example for you. So I've decided to cut off her Buddhist fate and feed it to the dogs. Hellion Vivian, isn't this more ruthless than beating people up? No, it's more ruthless than killing people. As expected, NI Feng's expression changed when she heard that he was going to cut off her Buddhist fate. She wanted to beg for mercy, but she realized that she could not utter a single word. The overwhelming number of demons swept over from behind the man. They carried a strong black aura and bit her limbs into pieces. Pain! That was the only feeling left. She looked at Baligaju with tears in her beautiful eyes, hoping to get a little pity from him. However, the man did not even look at her. He only whispered to Hellion Vivian, I've said it before, I'll take revenge for what Buddhism did to you back then. When he saw the past in the magic mirror, for the first time in his life, he tasted the word hate. He hated that he was not by her side. She was such a proud person, yet she was forced into such a desperate situation. Only by cutting off her Buddhist fate could she escape the marriage that those people arranged for her. It must be very painful to go through the heavenly tribulation. He wanted to return all the pain that she had to go through. He had never been a kind person, let alone after he fell from heaven. Bailey Jiaju's eyes narrowed. Those demons seemed to have gone mad as they tore off NI Feng's hair. Several rays of Buddha's light leaked out from her body and were swallowed into the demons' stomachs. Buddhist fate. Her Buddhist fate was swallowed just like that. NI Feng was in so much pain that she could not make a sound. After losing her protection, she finally revealed her original appearance. A woman covered with livor mortis spots and a heart that was corroded by resentment, leaving only ugliness in people's eyes. Some exorcists looked at her face and could not help but vomit. An iPhone also saw her own face. She was stunned at first, then she screamed like a madwoman. She could not bear such an ugly appearance. She was the golden lotus before Buddha. She was the purest Buddhist girl. She had been beautiful all her life. Even if she died, she could not be like this. She could not be defeated like this. However, she did not even have the Buddhist fate anymore. She could no longer become a human or a Buddha. She could not even be a ghost. Ah! Following Ni Feng's last scream, she turned into a puddle of black water and was burned to ashes by the flames of hell. Only then did people realize how terrifying the man who followed the Phoenix Girl was. The exorcists who went to the ancient tomb with Helly and Vivian were all sweating. They were thankful that they were polite to the man when they were in the ancient tomb. But who was this man? How could he open the gate of hell? The exorcists looked at each other. After getting rid of an iPhone, the elders of the exorcist city walked toward Helly and Vivian one by one. Their faces were full of guilt. They wanted to explain, but did not know what to say. Now they were like elderly in the past. They really wanted to give themselves 2 tight slaps. Helly and Vivian did not pay attention to them. Instead, she looked at the black cloud not far away and narrowed her eyes. Although the art of changing fate had ended, the wailing of hundreds of ghosts did not stop. If this continued, the dead would come back to life and the living would die. The 6th Tao would be in chaos. The baby would not be able to be born. No, she must stop this from happening and let the ghosts return to where they belong. Helly and Vivian did as she said. She stood in the blazing light of Buddha and put her palms together. She chanted, Lin Bing Do Zhejian Lai Zai 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 exorcism. As she chanted the 9 words mantra, the Bodhi Buddhist bone, which was still in the blazing fire, broke through the sky like a meteor with the clear cry of the phoenix and rushed into the sea of blood where the evil spirits were surging. The evil spirits seemed to have smelled something familiar and immediately closed their empty, crying mouths. The heavy Sanskrit chants came from the 9 heavens. Only then did the evil spirits realize that it was the Buddhist incense. It was the Buddhist incense that burned on Mountain Tenya and saved the world. The 9 words mantra formed a huge Buddhist seal that was like a Buddhist light shield. Not only the evil spirits in the sea of blood, but even the demons surrounding the exorcist city began to flee desperately. The most powerful formation they had ever seen in their lives was the divine exorcism mantra. Back then, they were suppressed under the earth's crust by this formation for 500 years. But this time, the Buddha seal was even more powerful than the divine exorcism mantra. They could even hear the Buddhist chants that were strong enough to penetrate the demonic nature. It was not only to kill them, but also to purify them. In the sea of blood, the Buddhist light surged endlessly. Vaguely, they seemed to be able to hear the Buddhist scripture, Amit Ba. Helly and Vivian stood there, her clothes fluttering in the wind. Lotuses bloomed with every step she took. It was a beautiful scene that had never been seen in the human world. Large Buddhist flowers fluttered and bloomed around Helly and Vivian's feet, as if they could cleanse all resentment. Everyone knew that it was the symbol of returning to the Buddhist position. The ancient phoenix had truly returned. Chapter 842. Then Bodhi entered the prison. The evil spirits fell into the sea of blood again in silence. One by one, they were bathed in the light of Buddha. Those huge Buddha flowers bloomed on the blood-red sea. It was a magnificent sight. It was a stunning beauty. Zhuge Yun looked at this scene and suddenly thought of an ancient fable. The fable was about the true Buddha Sakya. It was said that before Sakya became a Buddha, he saved all living beings. When he passed by Mount Buzhou, he saw the evil spirits in the sea of blood. He made a great vow that shocked the 6th Tao. I will not become a Buddha until the sea of blood is emptied. The method he used to empty the sea of blood was to jump into the evil spirits and experience the pain they suffered. In the end, the evil spirits were moved by Sakya's actions. They gave up their evil thoughts and fell into the reincarnation cycle again, becoming human again. Could it be that the Bodhi was doing the same thing? This thought flashed through Zhuge Yun's mind. He saw the phoenix standing there motionlessly and looking at the sea of blood. Her eyes moved slightly. Bodhi, Sakya. Heavy Sanskrit chants came from the depths of hell. Outside the exorcist city, the little king of hell, who was about to turn around and laugh at Jing Wushuang, said, "Did you see that? That is the real phoenix." The man in white fluttering clothes suddenly fell from the city wall. His whole body was emitting white light, as if he was about to burn out. A scene that he had never seen before appeared in his mind. It was in the incomparably cold Mount Tenya. Every monk would pass by him. Only that person would stop and tell him what was on her mind, wasting the mythical water on him. A divine bird flew across the sky, and the true Buddha sighed. He raised his head and said, "I don't regret it." Even if he mistook that person, he didn't regret it. Vaguely, it was as if he could still see the loneliest and wildest figure on the endless heaven stairs. The Buddha asked him if he had any other wishes. He said he wanted to see what that person looked like. Now he finally saw it. Jing Wushuang slowly closed his eyes, and the speed of falling was very fast. Not good. The little king of hell charged towards him, not caring about how many demons were behind him. With a flick of his finger, he covered Jing Wushuang with his black cloak. The ghost baby stared blankly at this scene, and its eyes turned red. Master. It had always known that its master would not live for long. His primordial spirit Buddha bone had been away from his main body for too long. Furthermore, Master had once suffered a heavenly tribulation. It knew that this day would come because its master had always been in poor health. But it shouldn't have happened now. It shouldn't have happened when Phoenix had just returned. Master had not seen her yet. Master had said that his only wish was to see that person. The ghost baby tugged at the corner of the man's shirt and refused to let go. It was still holding the huge gourd in its hand. The little king of hell liked this Bodhi very much, but he didn't expect it to be the Buddhist fate left behind by the true Buddha. "Hey, little resentful baby, stop pulling me. Why are all of you resentful babies like this?" He should have known that the person who could make the resentful baby recognize him as its master must have a true heart of enlightenment. For example, he knew Du and also Bodhi. But Bodhi, he hasn't seen the real phoenix yet. The ghost baby cried out. Children were very stubborn in certain aspects. The little king of hell stopped what he was doing and lowered his head to look at it. "Ghost baby, do you know that it was in hell that personally sent down the light of Buddha to erase Phoenix's inauspicious name?" "It's Sakyamuni," the ghost baby said while crying. The little king of hell nodded. "That's right. It was Sakya." And Bodhi had seen Phoenix a long time ago, because he was the Buddhist fate left behind by Sakya. The true Buddha achieved Vientiane. Now that the blood sea has been cleared, Sakya will return to his original form one day. Phoenix has won the variable from fate. This is what Bodhi wants to see. As he spoke, he lifted his black robe. Other than the moving light spots, there was no sign of Jing Wushuang. The ghost baby knew that its master was gone. Henceforth, in the vast seas and heavens, in the 6 realms and 8 wastelands, there would no longer be a shadow of master. His Buddhist bones had been melted in hell. And on Mount Buzhou, there would be no more blood sea plop. Everyone saw Hellion Vivian, who was standing on the shore, suddenly jump into the blood sea. Countless evil spirits surged toward her and opened their sharp claws at her. However, she ignored them and focused on looking for something. Finally, in the middle of the sea, she found the string of Bodhi that had lost all of its light of Buddha. She stretched out her hand with great effort, but she could not reach it. At this moment, a slender figure protected her in his arms. Not only did he block the evil spirit's sharp claws for her, he also scooped up the string of Bodhi and quickly carried her out of the sea. The blood sea was disappearing bit by bit. During this period of time, none of them could use any spells. They had to rely on the heart of deliverance to clear the blood sea, so they could not kill the evil spirits anymore. Bailey Jiaju's back was scratched with streaks and streaks of blood. It was frighteningly blurry. He had never been injured before. Even his fingers would not be cut by anything. But now, he used the most primitive way to protect her. Hellion Wei Wei raised her head and looked at the man. Water droplets dripped from her hair to the ground, but her eyes were clear and beautiful. Beligaju did not ask her why she jumped into the blood sea. Instead, he directly handed the Bodhi Buddhist bones to her. His smile was a little cold, but there was also a unique grace and elegance. Actually, I really want to make him disappear, but I know that if I make him disappear, you will remember him for a long time. Hellion Wei Wei, your kindness, this highness will repay it for you. Under the heavens, the only person you owe is this highness. He was still jealous. Hellion Wei Wei's eyes curved in a crescent as she moved toward those slightly pursed-thin lips and kissed them. The Bodhi in her hand was still warm. The blood sea was cleared, hell was closed, and the 6 paths of reincarnation returned to normal. Hellion Vivian handed the Bodhi in her hand to the ghost baby. Then, she released her light of Buddha. He will need a very long time to return. Can you help me take care of him? The ghost baby nodded and wiped the tears at the corner of its eyes. I will worship all the temples and ask Buddha to bring my master back. Buddha will grant your wish. Hellion Vivian stroked the ghost baby's head and looked down at the exorcist city that had returned to its peaceful state with a smile on her face. The little king of hell looked at the man who was covered in wounds and sneered, "Trying to trick me by injuring yourself again? You are now a demon, not a god. You can switch between a god and a demon. Isn't it easy for you to not get hurt in the blood sea? Shameless, too shameless." The man played with the bird as he spoke. Not only can we save people, but we can also earn money. The former isn't important, the latter is. You don't understand. It's not easy to earn money in the mortal world, but they're very willing to spend money when it comes to praying to gods and Buddhas. The ghost baby was speechless. By the way, the man looked back and said gently, "My surname is Pei. Remember to call me boss in the future." The ghost baby then realized that the man's eyes could not see light at all. He was blind, but it could not tell that he was blind just by looking at the way he walked. "Aren't you going to follow me?" The man's voice was very pleasant. It sounded a little like the Sanskrit in the temple. The ghost baby moved its short and thick legs again. No matter what, it had met a strange boss, and this man could make its master come back. The ghost baby tugged at the man's sleeve and returned to its previous state. Ever since that day, there was a new temple opposite the exorcist city. This temple was different from the other temples. Other than accepting people's incense, if the exorcists could not deal with the evil spirits, they would leave it to the people in the temple to deal with them. The strangest thing was that the abbot of this temple did not like people to call him abbot. He preferred people to call him boss. By the way, his fee was very high. The starting price was 1 million taels of silver. Not only did he do business with humans, but he also did business with ghosts. His purpose was to release souls. It was said that as long as one could release 9,999 souls, he would be able to cultivate a Buddha's body. Of course, this was all in the future. After that day, the exorcist city returned to peace. The exorcists originally wanted to leave the Phoenix girl behind, but when they were cleaning up the mess, they realized that Hellion Vivian had already left. The little king of hell thought that since the evil spirits and demons were all gone, everyone could reincarnate normally, and there was nothing for him to do. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to leave, the great demon grabbed him by the collar from behind. "Come with me to Buddhism." The little king of hell smiled viciously. "I don't like that place. Besides, the underworld has never interfered with the matters of Tian Dao and Buddhism. We only care about people's deaths, not their lives." "Did I say who should live?" Bailey Jiaju looked at him and pulled out a trace of evil. The little king of hell smacked his lips. "You can't be serious, right? Back then, you destroyed the Buddha's body of the Venerable One, causing the entire Mountain Tenya to be in turmoil. You want to do it again? How many people will die if you do it again?" "I will keep a low profile this time." Beligaju's voice was very indifferent. The little king of hell frowned. "It was really awkward to be held in someone's hand like this. Tell me first, how do you plan to keep a low profile? Kill those who should be killed. I won't touch those who shouldn't be killed. Beligaju curled his lips. The little king of hell bit the pacifier in his hand. Do you know how kind I am? I've never taken the initiative to kill Buddha. I went to Tiandao on the day I was born. After that, my father has been chasing after my mother. My father said that as long as my mother doesn't agree to marry him, I can't go to Tiandao in Buddhism. Besides, you don't need help to kill people. It doesn't make a difference whether I go or not. I don't need you to kill people, but after killing people, only people from the underworld can cut off the soul. The man lowered his voice. The little king of hell felt a sense of horror. You want to crush the venerable one's soul? Chapter 844. The man did not deny it. He only laughed softly. Let's go. I'll take you to see the glorious Buddhism. The little king of hell struggled to kick his legs and shouted, Wait a minute. Don't you need to ask your phoenix about this? It's not good to travel alone, and it's so far away. The man looked back at the carriage behind him and said with a gentle voice, She's still sleeping. Speaking of this, he paused, then lowered his eyes to look at the little person in his hand. If you wake her up, you don't have to go to Buddhism. I will fry you immediately. It is said that the king of hell's meat tastes good. Does your phoenix know that you covet my body so much? The little king of hell stared at him fiercely. I can go to Buddhism with you, but I have a request. Beligaju raised his eyebrows and signaled him to continue. The little king of hell said seriously, When you come back from Buddhism, go to the underworld and fight with my father. Fight for a long time, so that he doesn't have time to care about where I go. If your father hears you, he'll definitely stuff you back in. For some reason, Beligaju looked at the little king of hell in his hand and thought of a certain kid. It's so troublesome to give birth to a son. I really want to throw him away now. The son of the king of hell could not care less about what his father in the underworld would think. He had to go to the modern world. If he could chase after his wife, it would not be a big deal for him to go to Buddhism to collect a soul. Besides, he had never collected a soul from Buddhism. It was quite exciting to think about it. The little king of hell stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. When his blood-red eyes opened again, he saw the Buddhism in full bloom. The 33rd heaven was surrounded by auspicious clouds, and gospel was everywhere. A little monk was walking on the long staircase. In the 3,000 worlds, only the Thunder Temple was built in midair. Other than the floating clouds, there was only Mount Tenya where the snow had melted and red vegetation covered the ground. The little monk did not expect that someone would appear here. He raised his head and looked at Beligaju, then his eyes fell on the little king of hell. You are from the lower 3 realms. What lower 3 realms? I hate it when people like you divide the 6 realms into upper and lower realms. The little king of hell's eyes were bloodshot. The little monk clenched his fists and shouted in a low voice, How dare you? You unruly monster! Do you know where this is? How dare you barge in? The little king of hell raised his eyebrows and said evilly, You don't know who I am, right? As he spoke, a golden king character faintly appeared on his smooth forehead. When the little monk saw it, he took a big step back and almost fell on the stone steps. Yin, he is not the real king of hell. A Buddhist supremacy walked out of the temple and reached out to support the little monk. He glanced at the son of the king of hell and said nonchalantly, You're just the son of the king of hell. How dare you come to Buddhism and make a fuss when you haven't learned anything? Didn't anyone tell you that if you want to enter Buddhism, you have to report to the heavenly axiom? When did the lower 3 realms become so unruly? The little king of hell hated it when people talked to him, especially when they looked down on him. Although he could not do anything to a living Buddha. However, he could shatter a dead Buddha's soul at any time and make him unable to reincarnate. Big devil, I don't care about the others. After you kill this Buddhist supreme, keep him for me. Let him see who is the one who doesn't know the rules. When the little king of hell said this, his eyes were like flowing blood. When the Buddhist supreme heard this, he laughed and said disdainfully, You want a devil to kill a Buddha? What a joke. I am warning you, you better leave quickly. My Buddha is merciful. If I can spare your lives, I will spare yours. Don't force me to take action. I know that you are just relying on your father's reputation. However, he is not here now. You broke the rules of Buddhism. Even if I kill you, your father will not know. By then, the Buddhist supreme still wanted to say something, but he saw the man in the black robe in front of him move suddenly. In the next second, his throat was grabbed by the other party. The Buddhist supreme's eyes widened. He looked at the handsome face in front of him, and even his breath was unstable. You. Who was this person? Why was he so fast? In this world, was there anyone who could be faster than a Buddha? Baligaju laughed and did not speak. Instead, he grabbed his throat and rushed up a few steps. Then, he threw him out with one hand. Bam! The Buddhist supreme felt that his ribs were broken. He wanted to heal himself with the light of Buddha. However, he found that the place where the man grabbed could not gather the light of Buddha. You cough. The Buddhist supreme coughed out a mouthful of blood, staining the white stairs. Baligaju walked forward as if there was no one around. His black boots crushed the fallen flowers on the ground as if something heavy fell. Every step he took shook Mountain Tenya. All the little Buddhist monks ran out from where they were originally and looked at the man. There was a loud crashing sound. Countless demons surged out from behind the man. Each of those demons was hiding in the clouds, brandishing their claws. They dyed the auspicious clouds black and surged with unprecedented evil. Hordes of demons and devils had gathered at the peak of Mountain Tenya, pressing down on the Buddhist League. Such a scene. There were only two words in Buddhism. The first time was when the Emperor of Tian Dao cleared the Blood Sea and brought a large number of demons to the Buddhist sect for a banquet. The second time was when the Emperor took away the Buddha body of the Venerable and broke the Vajra shield of the Buddhist sect. The Buddhist supreme lying on the ground became a Buddha late, but he had heard of these legends. For the Buddhist sect, it was a great disrespect and an unforgivable sin. Boom! Thunder came from the sky. The scene that was supposed to be in hell was now above the Buddhist sect. The Buddhist supreme, who was ranked among the Buddhas, appeared one by one from the floating clouds. They could not see the appearance of the person standing on the stone stairs. They only felt the soaring evil aura and subconsciously thought that it was a big demon from Mount Buzhou. They raised one hand and chanted, Amitabha, demon, this is an important place of the Buddhist sect. It's not a place where you can mess around. Since you don't listen to our advice, we can only punish you and put you into the path of beast. You will never be able to transform into a human. After the Buddhas finished speaking, they wanted to send down the light of Buddha, the perfected person and the land of innocence. However, what they did not expect was that before they could do anything, the tall man standing on the stone stairs suddenly raised his head. Black aura surged endlessly. You want to put me into the path of beast? With just you? The Buddhas were shocked. Their eyes shook as they looked at the familiar face. Their expressions suddenly changed. Chapter 845. Emperor? It couldn't be wrong. Only that man could have that face that could overturn all living things, and that murderous aura that could shake the sky and the sea. How could this be? He had fallen from heaven. After falling from heaven, it was impossible for demons to go straight to Buddhism. Why was he here? All the Buddhas looked at each other with pale faces, but before they could make a move, a swoosh was heard. There was no sign of the man on the steps. When they closed their eyes again, one of the Buddha's arm was already in Baligaju's hand. The wind was blowing wildly in Buddhism. The demon behind Baligaju expanded 3 times in an instant. Back then, no one from heaven and Buddhism could defeat him, not to mention now. All the Buddhas originally thought that he only had demonic aura, but when he got closer, the divine sense that was enough to suppress the 6 Tao appeared. The Buddha who was being held by Baligaju widened his eyes and couldn't help but shout, God and demon in one body. Hearing these 4 words, the Buddha's already pale faces seemed to be brushed with a layer of powder. All the Buddhas gathered together and formed 99 Sanskrit sounds that reverberated in the ears, showing the shape of a lotus, just to shock the man. Emperor, heaven and Buddhism have never fought for 100 years. You fell from heaven and became a demon willingly. Why did you have to come to Buddhism? When the little king of hell heard that tone, he suddenly lost the mood to stop them. This group of Buddhists had lived for too long. Even the words they said were unpleasant. Although all the Buddhas knew the emperor's lethality, they also knew that he could only take away the Buddha's body, but as long as there was a piece of soul, he could be reborn as a human. They were afraid of Baligaju, but they couldn't lose the height of Buddhism. They put their fingers together and chanted Amitabha. Everything in this world has a cause and a fault. Emperor came to Buddhism for no reason. Isn't he afraid of the punishment? Bailey Jiaju curled his lips into a smile. He lifted his long leg and kicked down the Lord Buddha, who was crushed to death by him. His eyes lit up as he said, "Just like what you said, everything in this world has a cause and a fault. Back then, you forced Phoenix to abandon Buddhism and suffer the heavenly tribulation. Today, I'm here to pay you back for your evil deeds." Hearing the name Phoenix, all the Buddhas couldn't help but tremble. They had never done anything against their conscience. Golden Lotus asked Phoenix to marry the Dragon King of the East Sea. Otherwise, she would be sent to hell to clear the sea of blood. Everyone knew that with the Emperor at Mount Bujo at that time, no one could clear the Blood Sea. It was obvious that he wanted Phoenix to walk into a dead end. However, they did not expect that Phoenix would really refuse to marry no matter what they said. She even cut off her Buddhist fate and provoked the heavenly tribulation of 33 rolling thunders. At that time, they had wanted to help, but they had other concerns. Ever since Phoenix was born, none of the Buddhists had ever had blood on their hands. They also knew that Phoenix didn't fight for Buddhism, or rather, she would never refuse. This was all because she had promised the true Bodhisattva that she would protect the righteous and ward off evil, and pass through the suffering of the common people. However, after the true Buddha returned from hell, he could never return to his original state. Little Phoenix knew this in her heart. From then on, she picked up the scimitar and wanted to clear everything, all for the sake of that kindness. Back then, they had also promised the true Buddha that everything would go according to Phoenix's wishes. However, time passed by slowly. They faintly felt that they could not intimidate Phoenix at all. They began to be afraid that she would reveal her 4 evil faces and her blood-stained hands. Therefore, they did not make a move. Instead, they chanted Amitabha under the Vajra shield. The Venerable One was also there. They all acted according to the Venerable One's wishes. However, that day had always been the deepest secret in their hearts. The topic of Phoenix had also become a taboo in Buddhism that no one was allowed to mention. At this time, when they heard the man mention it, all the Buddhists felt a chill down their backs. They had thought of 1,000 reasons why the emperor would appear here, but they had never thought that he was here because of Phoenix's tribulation. All the Buddhists vaguely remembered something, and their lips paled even more. Could it be that when the Buddhists and Buddhists were fighting, the emperor disregarded the heavenly priest's obstruction and cut off the venerable Buddha's body because of Phoenix, not because of the witch? He said that he wanted them to bear the consequences of that year. Did he want to cut off all their Buddha's bodies? All the Buddhists were shocked. At this time, they finally knew what kind of grudge the other party had against them. The Buddhists believed in karma the most. When Phoenix was forced into that situation, although they were not the masterminds, they had been watching coldly from the sidelines. Even they themselves did not know where their compassion had gone. Why were they so indifferent? Even they themselves hoped that Phoenix, who had smeared the name of Buddhism, would be dealt with as soon as possible, regardless of whether it was confinement or marriage. That was why there was such a bad result today. All the Buddhists raised their eyes. Before they could recover from their regret, they saw Baligaju's hand had already reached out to the second Buddha Supreme, and the crisp sound of bones cracking was heard. All the Buddhists trembled. They heard the man's low voice, with a strong sense of evil. "Do you think that I can only cut off your Buddha's bodies, but not your souls?" At this point, Baligaju tilted his head and smiled. As his robe fluttered, his eyes were filled with golden light. "Little brat, cut off the soul of the Buddha Supreme that I just kicked down. Crush it." Hearing this, all the Buddhists could no longer maintain the panic in their hearts. They shouted at the little king of hell, "You can't do this. We are Buddhists. The underworld can't interfere with the affairs of heaven and Buddhism. If you listen to the emperor's order to kill the Buddhists, you will break the rules. If the rules are broken, the 6 paths will be in chaos. Who said that I broke the rules? Within the 6 paths, as long as anything dies, we have the right to deal with it. The little king of hell smiled viciously. He raised his axe and chopped at the Buddha Supreme, whose body had been cut off. Above the Buddhists, lightning flashed and thunder roared, and black fog rose everywhere. That was the real killing of Buddha. They originally thought that they would not die or be destroyed. However, they did not expect that the other party would come up with such a way to deal with them. Moreover, did they underestimate the child? He was just a child of the underworld. How could he have the ability to crush souls? As if he knew what the Buddhists were thinking, Baligaju smiled. His eyes were full of evilness. Where do you think he was born from? A Buddha Supreme saw the little king of hell's original appearance. He was so shocked that he took a big step back. The heavenly path, he is that ominous child of the heavenly path. Hearing this news, all the Buddhists could not stay any longer. Their kasayas fluttered in the wind, and they wanted to return to the Thunder Temple. As long as they closed the Buddhist door, they could avoid the fate of having their souls crushed. The little shamey on the stone steps looked up. Every one of them opened their eyes wide and looked a little stunned. They had never seen such a scene. All the Buddhists were scrambling to escape. Was this still their Buddhism? The young acolytes were all very young, but they were basically born on Mount Tenya. Almost every one of them worshipped sincerely every day, so that they could one day become one of the Buddhas and save all sentient beings and relieve all sentient beings from suffering. However, when they saw the scene in the sky, they were disappointed. They were disappointed with the current Buddhism. The little shamey did not run away anymore. One by one, they sat back on the long steps with one hand held up. Their small bodies were as straight as a pencil. They did not recite the scriptures. They just looked at Bailey Jiaju, who was walking toward them. Their bright eyes were filled with fearlessness. Their thoughts were simple. They had to guard Mount Tenya. Only then would the true Buddha Sakya return. The little king of hell smiled. These little monks are not bad. Sakya has a good eye. Bailey Jiaju acted as if he didn't hear anything, but he didn't hurt those little Buddhist monks. His figure shuttled through them like a shadow. Then he stretched out a slender and fair hand, forcibly blocking the Buddhist gate that was erected between heaven and earth. There was a loud bang. The Buddhist door that all the Buddhists thought could withstand everything was shattered. In the midst of the dust, Baligaju said to the little shamey behind him, "I won't destroy the place where she used to live." In other words, Baligaju came here for revenge. He would not destroy Mount Tenya. The little shamey looked at each other. One of them rubbed his red eyes. Lord Phoenix is still alive, right? I don't know. The little shamey knew that the little monk was by Phoenix's side. Logically speaking, the little monk should have become a Buddha long ago. However, after so many years, the little monk still stayed at the place where Phoenix used to live. He did not go to the Hall of Great Strength. The little monk raised his head. His eyes were red. She must be alive. The little shamey were all wearing kasayas. There were 6 dots on their heads. They looked funny when they carried people. However, they still carried their companions in their arms. They said in a childish voice, "Since the Emperor is here, I think Lord Phoenix should be here too." "Yes, yes, yes." The little shamey nodded heavily. They then chanted Amitabha. I wonder what the Emperor is going to do next. What Baligaju wanted to do was very simple. The moment he shattered the Buddhist door, before anyone could react, he pinched one of the Buddhas. Black feathers burst out from his body and fell down in clusters, covering the path. As he walked, the Hall of Great Strength seemed to reverberate with the sound of Sanskrit. However, this time it was no longer the sound of Buddhist scriptures. It was the unique voice of a demon. The sound reached the 6 paths and disturbed all the peace. The Venerable, who had just cultivated his Buddha body and was in seclusion, did not know what had happened. He only calculated with his fingers that today should be the day when the Golden Lotus took away the Phoenix form. After this day, the Golden Lotus would become the Phoenix, and he would fully control Buddhism again. Sakya, the true Buddha, he would have to wait for another 10,000 years before he could become one. 10,000 years was too long. It was long enough for him to do many things. As the Venerable was thinking, he heard a faint sound. The Sanskrit of the devil? How could such a sinful sound appear in their noble Buddhism? Chapter 846. The Venerable opened his eyes unhappily. However, when he saw the figure standing in the middle of the Mahavira hall, the color on his face immediately disappeared. He, who was sitting on the golden lotus, suddenly stood up. His eyes shook violently, and his eyes were full of guilt and fear. He knew that this was not the behavior of a Buddha venerable. However, he still could not control his emotions. For so many years, only the man in front of him had heard him in the six paths. The experience of being stripped of his Buddha body was so painful that it took him nearly 1,000 years to recover to his current state. He really did not want to go through it again. Then, he could only make the first move. The Venerable narrowed his eyes and threw the prayer beads on his wrist upward. The light of Buddha intertwined and formed a huge golden lotus that was as tall as a person. It pressed down heavily on Baligaju. The man curled his lips and smiled. His slender figure quickly stepped back and then rushed forward, forming a dazzling white light. There was a loud bang. The man's hand forcibly penetrated the 1,000 feet light of Buddha and went straight for the internal organs of the lotus. His handsome side face was scratched with a bloody scar. Mixed with the blood dripping down, it only made his smile look more evil and evil. The Venerable did not care if he would be condemned morally if he made the first move. He looked at the Buddhas, which meant that he wanted them to chant the incantation with him. He emphasized his voice and chanted with conviction. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Baligaju. Even the emperor, who was born from chaos, could not escape from the thousands of Buddhas. This was the Mahavira hall, the source of all evil. As long as all the Buddhas spoke at the same time, even if they could not do anything to the man, they could make the little king of hell unable to refute. The Venerable's eyes were gloomy. At this time, he no longer had the face that a Buddha should have. Every inch of his expression was scarier than an evil ghost when looked at closely. The Buddhas did not dare to go against his will, nor did they want to go against his will. If they did not come up with a way to deal with the emperor, when the Venerable was gone, the next person that the emperor would kill would be themselves. Therefore, all the Buddhas present put their palms together and kept chanting Buddhist scriptures. The little king of hell could no longer resist the Sanskrit chants that reverberated in the hall. He covered his ears with his hands, and his expression was pained, as if he was experiencing a nightmare. Some people said that 10,000 Buddha slaying was the mantra that Buddhism was most unwilling to use. This was because it was the complete opposite of Buddhism's philosophy of delivering all living beings. Buddhism led people to do good. The true meaning of kindness was not blindly benevolence and tolerance. It was to not take the initiative to hurt others and not blindly follow others. True kindness would never force someone to do something. If it is dangerous to make a sound, keep silent. If you don't have the strength to shine, then don't shine on others. But don't defend darkness just because you're used to it. Don't mock those who are braver and have more energy than yourself. 10,000 Buddhas was a Buddhist mantra that gathered the rumors and slanders of the human world. It was a power that could destroy people's hearts. The little king of hell supported his forehead with one hand, and his fangs were faintly protruding from the corners of his mouth. If he could not move, no matter how powerful Baligaju was, he could only cut off the bodies of the Buddhas, but he could not crush their souls. This was the Venerable One's idea. From the moment he saw the little king of hell following behind the man, he had planned to break up the combination of the two of them. The Buddhist chants deepened again. The little king of hell's small body began to tremble, and his ruby-like eyes were like flowing blood. The Buddhas were frightened, but they could not stop. Once they stopped, the emperor would immediately break their necks. The Buddhas straightened their hands and continued to chant the Buddhist mantra. The Venerable One's chanting was the fastest, and the sound of the Buddhist mantra continuously rushed toward the little king of hell. Just when he thought he was going to succeed, his collar had already been ruthlessly pulled up by someone. The hands were slender and strong, and stained with blood. From the beginning to the end, the speed was astonishing. The Venerable looked at the excessively evil and cold handsome face in panic, and suddenly laughed out loud. Without the son of King of Hell's soul-splitting axe, even if you kill me 100 times, I will still be able to re-establish my Buddhist position. Just like back then, when you fell from heaven and became a demon, I will still stay in Buddhism. The soul of a Buddha is never something that you lowly Taoists can destroy. What if I join in? A voice as cool as water sounded from behind the empty space, as if it could penetrate the layers of auspicious clouds. The Buddhas looked back and saw a figure with fluttering clothes against the dazzling light, walking in from outside the hall step by step. The people could not see her face clearly, but if they did, they would not be able to calm down anymore. She was wearing a fiery cloak and holding a Buddhist bone scimitar. Her eyes were as beautiful as the lakeside of Mountain Tenya, and she faintly emitted a fatal fragrance. She walked out of the light, just like how she had stepped into the hall of great strength countless times. She carried an arrogant aura from head to toe, as if she had never put anyone in her eyes except for Sakya. Some people had guessed that it was because of this that the Venerable One did not like her, although he did not show anything. After all, as the Venerable One, he had to treat all the Buddhas equally. But that vague feeling could not be dispersed no matter how hard they tried. Baligaju tilted his head and glanced at her. The light in his eyes softened, and his deep voice sounded as if he was coaxing a child. Why don't you sleep a little longer? If you sleep a little longer, I can finish this and go back to accompany you. Now I'm covered in blood, and I haven't cleaned it up yet. Stand away first. The man's tone was so natural that it was as if he was just stating a fact. The King of Hell's son clutched his stomach as he thought to himself, this great demon king is still trying to disguise his image in the eyes of the phoenix. Enough is enough. The little King of Hell knew that the great devil did not want Phoenix to know that he had come to Buddhism. He probably wanted to quietly eliminate all the Buddhas. Unfortunately, Phoenix was too smart. When she woke up and realized that they were not there, she would know that they had gone up to the 33rd heaven. This time, Hellion Vivian did not stand away as Baligaju said. Instead, she walked out of the light and said with a smile, I was bored waiting, so I came up. I wanted to sleep a little longer and wait for you, but I thought carefully. When you help me vent my anger, I have to watch from the side so that I won't be at a disadvantage. As soon as she finished speaking, Hellion Vivian's face appeared in the light and shadow. On Mountain Tenya, in the Hall of Great Strength, all the Buddhas stopped chanting and looked at the person in front of them in shock. Phone Phoenix? It's really Phoenix. The Venerable looked at the person who should not have appeared in Buddhism at this time in disbelief. His fingers trembled. You? How can you? Your Dharma? Venerable, do you think that I, Phoenix, am so weak that I can't even beat your subordinate, little Jinlians? Hellion Vivian looked at the old man in the Kasaya mockingly and said meaningfully, just based on this, you can't even beat Sakya, and you still want to replace his position to preside over Buddhism forever? Do you deserve it? The Venerable panicked when his deepest secret was exposed by Hellion Vivian. He did not believe that there was anyone in this world who could beat fate. This was impossible. No, it's impossible for you to get your Dharma again. It's impossible for the Golden Lotus to fail. The six senses of Buddha can see through everything. Eternal loneliness is your destiny. Sakya? Heh, he shouldn't have cleared your name in the first place. A product like you who was born in the path of hell is not worthy of becoming a Buddha. I know that Phoenix has a proud character. With you in Buddhism, the true Buddha will return to one day, but so what? Sakya is a person who cares about the three lower realms. What's wrong with me replacing him? The Venerable One had shouted out those words. The Buddhas had never thought that the Venerable would have the idea of replacing the true Buddha. They thought that no matter how the Venerable punished Phoenix, it was only because she had too many sins on her hands. Such a person had to bear the consequences. Moreover, the Venerable had never liked Phoenix because of her pride, so he always suppressed her. They did not expect that all this was because the Venerable did not want the true Buddha to return to one. At that moment, the Buddha's thoughts were in a mess. They did not know what to do next due to the destruction of their knowledge. They only looked at the Venerable, no longer with longing and obedience. Hellion Vivian laughed. She looked at the person who had been tormenting her. Her eyes were extremely cold. Back then, before Buddhism was established, Sakya went through the hardships of the human world and made a great vow to save all living beings. He crossed the sea of blood and evil spirits with his body. What about you? What have you done? Don't you believe in the mandate of heaven? Since heaven has given the position of the true Buddha to Sakya, even if you cultivate for 1,000,000 years, you will still be an evil person. Stop! Just as the Venerable was about to scold her, he was punched in the chest. Then, he felt the cold penetrating his heart. Baligaju had always been fast, especially when it came to beating people up. There was a cracking sound. The Venerable's rib was pulled out by him. The golden light of Buddha began to flow out of his body bit by bit. Upon seeing this, Hellion Vivian did not waste time. Her body swayed, and in a smooth motion, she brought the phoenix bone in her hand close to the Venerable's eyes. The Venerable did not dodge. The little king of hell could no longer lift his soul-splitting axe. He had said that even if they killed him, he could resurrect countless times and regain control of Buddhism. As long as Sakya was not around, he would be the master of Buddhism. This was a destiny that no one could change. As if she had seen through the honored sir's thoughts, Hellion Wei Wei curled her lips into a smile and suddenly stopped in front of him. Her voice was evil as she enunciated each word clearly. I think there is one thing that you may not know, the honored sir. The phoenix bone blade can also sever the fate of Buddha and break the Buddha's soul. Chapter 847. Upon hearing this, the Venerable's pupils suddenly shrank, as if he was unwilling to believe it. He was about to open his mouth to struggle. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, Phoenix's bone knife pierced through his chest. Hellion Wei Wei held the hilt of her knife and looked at him indifferently. The Venerable's face began to turn pale, and even his expression began to panic. The golden light that lingered around his body began to weaken and fade away, as if it was being sucked away by something. Phoenix's howl echoed in the great Buddha's hall. It was the sound of true Buddha Sakya's light of Buddha descending into hell. All the Buddhas widened their eyes. Some of them became Buddhas late and had never seen Phoenix in action. No matter how powerful the legendary Phoenix was, they only treated it as a legend. However, when they saw it today, they realized that they had underestimated her lethality from the beginning. The airflow moved along with her palm, and the sharp edge of the knife surrounded circles of Buddha spirits, stirring up the air in the entire hall. In the fierce wind, the Venerable did not even have the strength to resist, and he was shaken and slid a few meters away. This was the first time that the Venerable came down from the high and mighty Golden Lotus Buddha throne and was stabbed down by Phoenix's knife in such an embarrassing position. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, and then he coughed until his mouth was full of blood. He looked at Hellion Vivian, as if he was still unwilling to accept his fate. Hellion Vivian held the bone knife and walked toward him. Her clothes were as hot as fire, as if it could burn everything in the world. She looked down at the Venerable who was beginning to age without the light of Buddha and smiled. Didn't you hate my evil form in the past? This is my evil form, my bones. Phoenix originally existed to purge Buddhism. You calculated all the destinies in the world and knew the use of my evil form, so you were afraid. You were afraid that one day I would pull you down from the Buddha throne. So you thought of a way to use my destinies and let the Golden Lotus steal my Dharma form. You didn't want me to be in Buddhism, and it would be best if you could make me disappear completely. Even if all of this was discovered, it didn't matter because you would have a way out no matter what. Unfortunately, you only calculated this, but you didn't know that my evil form could not only pull you down from the Buddha throne, but also cut off your Buddha soul. Of course, it's not surprising that you didn't know, because only Sakya in the world knows this. When I was brought to Buddhism, I promised him that unless it was no longer Buddhism, the Phoenix would never kill a Buddha, but now... Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes and looked coldly at the Venerable, who was trying to escape with the soul escape technique. She stabbed him again. The last trace of the light of Buddha was cut off. The Venerable watched as his Buddha soul began to fall apart, and his lips trembled. He never thought that Phoenix's evil form was actually her bones. It was never part of Buddhism, and it was a rebellious bone that was born from hell. He had calculated everything and peeked into the secrets of heaven, but he never thought that he would lose. He was the venerable who could make Sakya unable to return to the Buddha throne for thousands of years. He actually lost to a product of the lower three realms. The venerable looked at Hellion Vivian, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable viciousness. Blood kept flowing out from his throat. You cough, cough. You thought that you could be happy after killing me. Cough, cough, cough. From the day you were born, you were destined to never be able to get married. If you obediently stayed in Buddhism and listened to its orders, I wouldn't do anything to you. Unfortunately, you were too arrogant, and that's why things came to this cough, cough, to this point. It's the same now. You can't get your happiness. Anyone and anything who gets close to you has a purpose. Those who don't have a purpose won't be by your side. You and the Emperor, you cough, are destined to never grow old together. After roaring the last sentence, the venerable's ribs were suddenly crushed into pieces. He widened his eyes in fear. This time, the one who attacked was not Hellion Vivian, but Beligaju. His usually good-looking eyebrows sank, and with a force, his deep eyes turned into the gold of the heavenly axiom. There was a bang. The venerable's body was split from the middle. His twisted and unwilling face only stayed in the air for a second, and then turned into a pool of red blood. Hellion Vivian stood there and did not retract the bone knife in her hand. Instead, she slashed upwards. Above the great Buddha's hall, countless light of Buddha shone, and those light of Buddha fell on every Buddha like a bunch of knives. 3,000 feet, the Buddha's soul was damaged, including the venerable. All his good and evil were annihilated into dust by the phoenix in an instant. The twisted expressions of the Buddhas were more terrifying than the ghosts in the sea of blood. Their souls were extracted and destroyed, and their Buddha bodies turned into dust. When the wind blew, nothing was left behind. The little king of hell stood there coolly, and his first reaction was to look out of the hall. Above the heavenly tribulation of the 999 steps, the young Buddhist monks who were meditating and guarding the temple had a faint light of Buddha behind their heads. Above the glacier, divine birds flew together, and Bodhi broke out of the ground. That was the miracle of the Buddhas returning to their positions. And that was Sakya's Dharma, that was about to become one. Buddha was born from the heart. It turned out that the existence of the phoenix of Buddhism was never to kill. Only she could make the true Buddha become one. Amitabha. The young Buddhist monk smiled at Hellion Vivian, bright and benevolent. Only little monk ran over by himself and reached out to hug Hellion Wei Wei's waist. His body was also very small. He lifted his head and looked at Hellion Wei Wei with bright eyes. "My lord, I knew you would come back." Hellion Vivian chuckled and said lazily, "Yes, but I'm going to leave now, to the human world. Go, go." The little monk smiled and said, "I'll help you recite scriptures in Buddhism and pray for Buddha to protect you. But it's strange. Why is it that my friends have all become Buddhas, but I'm still like this?" Hellion Vivian did not say anything. The little monk looked at his small hands and smiled again. "It must be because I'm not working hard enough. I'll recite scriptures properly, and I'll help you clean the place where you live every day. When the time comes, you can still come back when you want to." Hearing the little monk's words, no one said anything. However, everyone knew that if Phoenix left today, it would be impossible for her to return to Buddhism. She had used up too much energy, and she was pregnant. If she wanted to return to Buddhism, she had to give up the child. Phoenix would not do that. She wanted to control her own life and do what she wanted to do. All of this was what the little monk wanted to express. However, he was still too young, and his wisdom was still hazy, so he did not understand what was fixed. "I'll remember that you're still in Buddhism." Hellion Vivian lowered her head and reached out to touch the little monk's head. The last trace of memory returned. It was the memory of her breaking out of her shell. A small face that could contain all things in the world. So familiar, Sakya. The little monk did not hear clearly. "Lord, what did you say?" "Nothing." Hellion Vivian retracted her hand and looked at Beligaju. Seeing his eyes staring at the little monk who was hugging her waist, she could not help but smile. No wonder she felt a chill on her back just now. It turned out that His Highness was jealous again. The little monk still wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by a deep and cold voice. "Don't you need to recite scriptures?" The little monk did not dare to go against the emperor, so he said in a small voice, "I want to send Lord back. It doesn't matter if I recite scriptures later. She's mine. Why do I need you to send her back?" As Beligaju spoke, he directly reached out and pulled Hellion Vivian over. Then, he looked at the little monk in front of him indifferently. "If you keep delaying like this, when will you become a Buddha? The people around you have already become Buddhas, but you're still so young. Don't you want to think about the reason?" The little monk was provoked. He dared to be angry, but he did not dare to say anything. Then, he said to the phoenix, "Lord, I won't send you off. I'm going to recite scriptures now. I'll definitely become a Buddha, definitely." After saying that, the little monk hugged the scriptures and ran away. He bit the tip of the pen and started to recite scriptures angrily. Hellion Vivian looked at his back with a faint smile. It was so quiet and leisurely in the light beam. The King of Hell's son stroked his chin with his fingers and snorted. "Indeed, the Buddha gives birth to all forms. I bet even the Venerable One couldn't guess or predict that Sakyamuni's Buddha fate would transform in a Bodhi while his true form would be a child." Bailey Jiaju was standing beside him. His voice was faint, but there was a smile on his face. That appearance made him look very elegant and gentle, but that pair of eyes was cold. Brats are usually so troublesome, especially this brat. I used to think that he was too much of an eyesore, so there was a reason for it. The little King of Hell. Wait a minute, great demon. You shouldn't have wanted to kill him because of this. However, the little monk was very afraid of the great demon. Poor child, he still did not know how he had offended the great demon. "Let's go." Hellion Vivian raised her head and kissed Beligage's lips. The man's eyes softened, and his smile became much more normal. Even so, the aura emitted from his body made people feel dangerous, especially when he walked forward with Hellion Vivian in his arms. Thousands of demons followed behind. Every one of them was baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, but they were unbelievably obedient. The sky was dyed black. His doting seemed to be reserved for only one person, and what was left for the world was the endless murderous and demonic aura. He did not notice the deep sadness in Hellion Vivian's eyes when she lowered her head. That was the first time that Hellion Vivian showed such an expression. She was confident in everything, but because she saw the scene that the Venerable One recalculated before he died, she had scruples. No matter what, she must not let him know. Perhaps from now on, she should cultivate the relationship between him and the baby. Hellion Vivian always acted immediately when she thought of something. After returning to the carriage, she asked the man who was reading to come closer and listen to the movements in her stomach. In the end, he casually glanced at her and said with a serious expression, "Your body is not in good condition now. It's not suitable for intimacy. Don't seduce me." Hellion Vivian. Chapter 848. She just wanted him to hear the baby's voice and know when she was seducing him. Helplessly, she could never understand His Highness' godlike thinking. "Do you feel so uncomfortable if I don't kiss you?" Beligaju put aside the ancient scroll in his hand and then pinched her chin with a smile. Before Hellion Vivian could speak, the little King of Hell, who was sitting in the same carriage, couldn't hold it in anymore. He looked at Beligaju with his white teeth slightly exposed. "Please, there's still a child here. Don't teach me bad things, and don't show off your love in front of single people." Beligaju looked back faintly. "Why are you still here?" What did he mean by why was he still here? The little King of Hell was angry. "You haven't done what you promised me. You said that if I went to Buddhism with you, you would go to the underworld and fight with my father." "I did say that." Beligaju leaned back lazily and took Hellion Vivian in his arms. He looked at the little King of Hell. "But when did I say that I would fulfill my promise?" The little King of Hell was furious. He pointed a finger at him. "You're cunning. You're shameless. Demons are cunning. You people from the underworld are the same." Beligaju reached out and picked up the little king of hell and threw him away. The little king of hell looked at the carriage rushing into the capital. He was not angry. He rolled on the ground and smiled viciously. Then he put the big axe on his shoulder. If you don't go to the underworld to find my father, I'll ask my father to come up here to find you. Anyway, he sees you as a rival in love. Who asked you to be more handsome than him? After the little king of hell finished speaking, he felt that he was so handsome. He took out a small mirror and made a handsome pose. Because this was an official road, the number of people who took this road to enter the capital would usually be more than a few. Everyone was already exhausted from the journey, but they didn't expect to see a child suddenly thrown out of a carriage in front of them. What made people even more dumbfounded was that the child seemed to have broken his head from the fall. He kept holding a mirror and looking at himself, as if he wished he could see a flower in it. How pitiful. What a pity for that face. People shook their heads and continued to walk forward. The current capital city was different from the past. It was said that the inspection was especially strict. It seemed that the retired emperor was sick, the third prince had not returned, and the seventh prince was still very young. Therefore, the imperial court had become a matter of discussion between the four cabinet ministers. Ever since the third prince cleaned up the court officials, very few people dared to be presumptuous. This time, for some unknown reason, there was another minister who appeared out of nowhere. Could it be that the legends were true? In order to prevent the demonic aura from invading the capital, the third prince went to the ancient tomb where no one dared to go and never came back. Was that why these ministers dared to act so recklessly? Ordinary people didn't know much, but when they entered the city, there were soldiers who wanted to collect money for no reason. They said that if they didn't pay, they wouldn't be allowed to enter the city. Baligaju's carriage was also stopped. The two shadows driving the carriage looked at each other. Their voices were very calm, as if they didn't have the slightest bit of emotion. Get out of the way. The soldier had never seen such a prickly person. He held his official sword and shouted, "You want me, your grandfather, to get out of the way? You've got guts. But I'm in a good mood, so I won't lower myself to the level of people like you who don't understand the situation. Obediently hand over the money, and I'll let you pass. Don't want to hand it over? Go back to where you came from. I don't want to catch people anymore. I'm tired of catching people every day." As the soldier spoke, he walked towards the carriage with the whip in his hand. In the carriage, Hellion Vivian was sitting in Baligaju's arms. When she heard the soldier's words, she couldn't help but raise her beautiful eyebrows. Baligaju's expression was very indifferent, but his hand stopped flipping the book. His white fingertips paused at the side, and his eyes were a little cold. He didn't like to be disturbed. This was something that Hellion Vivian had always known. However, the man was more serious than before. He had to hold her in his arms, even when he was reading a book. His eyes were cold as he hugged her from behind, and his tone was lazy as he asked her to help him turn the pages. He was really a young master. Hellion Vivian squeezed his hand and was chuckling. She liked to play with his hand. It was noble and slender, and the temperature was just right. Baligaju also liked to be held by her like this. It was like holding the paws of his own kitten. Although he didn't have a cat, he had a phoenix. This feeling of being relied on by a pet was always good. Now that she heard the noise outside, Hellion Vivian naturally wouldn't play with him anymore. Her eyes looked outside. Baligaju was slightly dissatisfied. He pulled her hand back and only said one word to the outside. His voice was indifferent and somewhat bone-chilling. "Get lost." Hearing this, the onlookers took in a deep breath. For the courage of the person who spoke. They knew that the official was under the command of the four ministers. He also listened to the orders of the higher-ups. He had a lot of prestige. Even many officials from other places didn't dare to provoke him. They had to obediently hand over money. But now, the person in the carriage actually dared to ask him to get lost? "AI, with my bad temper, who are you asking to get lost?" The official didn't expect the other party to be so rude. In addition, the carriage didn't belong to those lords in the capital. His head heated up and his anger rose. "This master is kind enough to spare you this time, but you don't appreciate it. Someone come, smash this carriage for this grandpa. Take away all the people inside and throw them into the prison." As the official spoke, he raised the whip in his hand and was about to lash it out. But in the next second, his whole body was lifted up by the shadow behind him with one hand. He was heavily thrown to the ground. The official grimaced in pain. When he touched his face, it was covered in blood. His voice became even angrier. Go and call for soldiers. Call for more soldiers. Call my uncle over as well. Kill all of them for this master, this bunch of blind things. When the shadow heard this, they looked at each other and stood there quietly. They didn't refute, as if they were waiting for something, until a cold word came from the carriage again. Kill. Only then did they move. They moved like shadows. When they swung their swords, 4 or 5 people twitched and fell to the ground. Only the official was left. He was so scared that his face turned white. He looked at the carriage in horror. The owner of the voice had never appeared before, but it was because he didn't appear that made people feel even more terrified. The 2 people standing in front of him, he originally thought that they were 2 martial artists who knew a little martial chi. But after the scene, just now, he realized that the other party wasn't that simple. But these 2 people still had to listen to the orders of the person in the carriage. That person, who exactly was he? Chapter 849. How dare you? In the midst of the chaos, a man wearing armor walked over. He looked like he came from the military camp and looked very fierce. He angrily looked at the carriage that was about to break into the city, then looked at his nephew, who was injured on the ground. His eyes narrowed. In public, you actually dare to kill an official of the imperial court. Do you want to rebel, or are you tired of living? Don't say that this general didn't give you a chance. Get off the carriage and follow this general. If you don't get off, this general will take your dog lives. As he spoke, he placed the long saber in his hand vertically on the ground. With a loud bang, layers and layers of cracks actually appeared on the ground. The common people outside the city were scared out of their wits by this scene. They hid in a panic and looked at the man, their faces full of fear. When they ran, only the carriage was left in the middle of the road. It was neither hot nor cold, but it was hard to ignore. 2 shadows stood on the left and right, their expressions unmoved. The people in the carriage didn't have any intention of coming down. Seeing this, the general guarding the city was completely angry. Good, very good. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, right? Archers, get ready. Shoot all these lawless rebels to death. It was obvious that this person was much more powerful than the head of the officers who had just been knocked down. Just as he gave the order, a swoosh sound was heard. The hundreds of soldiers inside and outside the city walls all raised the bows in their hands. Every arrow was aimed at the carriage in the middle of the road. Shoot! The order of the general guarding the city was very fierce. He was such a law-abiding person, and the other party injured his nephew. If he didn't kill these people with his own hands, it would be hard to get rid of the hatred in his heart. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Hundreds of bows and arrows were shot together. Each arrow carried the whistling sound of the wind. The general guarding the city smiled, as if he could already see the tragic end of the other party. Even the common people couldn't bear to see the scene of blood splattering and turned their heads away. But no one would have thought that just as the arrows were about to reach the carriage, they saw the air suddenly move, and the carriage was covered with a thin layer of light. Everyone in the Dragon War Empire knew that it was a martial chi spirit body that could only be formed by gold rank martial artists. Those arrows seemed to have been blocked and stopped in midair, unable to move forward even half an inch for a long time. Following that, a loud bang was heard. All of the arrows that were shot out were shattered by that powerful chi. Amidst the dust inside and outside the city, everyone widened their eyes. The officer lying on the ground looked at the general and stuttered, Uncle, who are they? How can he be so powerful? How would I know if you asked me? The general of the city guard also became unusually irritable, but soon he sneered, it's just a gold rank warrior. In the past, gold rank warriors were difficult to find. It's not like you don't know that since the Grand Preceptor came to our capital, most of the wood rank warriors have advanced to gold rank. There's nothing to be surprised about. As he spoke, the general raised the saber in his hand to the sky, and a new group of people appeared on the city wall. However, This time, they were no longer ordinary officers, but real soldiers. Moreover, these soldiers looked stronger than ordinary soldiers. Every one of them had a ghost mask on their faces, and they looked at their feet with murderous intent. Countless black shadows surged out from the city, and the strong smell of blood made Hellion Vivian in the carriage gently curl the corners of her mouth. It seems that during the time we were not in the capital, the city guards in the capital have changed. Beligaju played with her claws and casually raised his eyes. A cold light flashed in his deep eyes, but he still had no intention of going out. Instead, he leaned back with Hellion Vivian's waist in his arms. In an extremely luxurious and lazy manner, he waved his long sleeves towards the window. Your martial chi is not bad, but just because of your martial chi, you want to go against the people of our Grand Preceptor's residence? How many lives do you think you have? The general of the city guards thought that the other party was provoking him. As he mocked, he raised the saber in his hand and wanted to lead thousands of soldiers to charge over and tear apart the carriage. Just at this moment, not far from the city, there was a sudden burst of dust and dirt. That was the sound of at least 1,000 armored horses trampling on the mud, and every sound shook the earth. General, there seems to be something wrong. The soldier closest to the general of the city guards leaned over and whispered, "It sounds like there are soldiers and horses moving. But at this time, who would dare to approach the city?" The general of the city guards narrowed his eyes, and just as he was about to take a closer look, the soldiers and horses moved like lightning. The lightning-like black cavalry seemed to have leaped out from the horizon. Every one of them was holding a long saber and wearing a mask. They were like shadows in the night, sweeping over like a whirlwind. They are three. Before one of the soldiers could finish speaking, the sabers in the hands of the black cavalry had already been raised and lowered. Wherever they went, there would not be a single living person, until there were no more intruders around the carriage. Only then did the black cavalry dismount and kneel down on one knee. They looked at the carriage respectfully and said in a deafening voice, "Welcome back to the capital, Master." The 3,000 shadows would never leave the vicinity of the capital. When Bailey Jiaju left the capital, they would hide. Once Bailey Jiaju stepped into the boundary of the capital, they would assemble into an army within a short period of time and follow Bailey Jiaju dozens of meters away, ready to appear and kill the enemy at any time. This was the reason why Beligaju established the Shadow Army. No matter what happened in the palace or outside, his military power would always be the only one in the world. And those who did not know anything and were still proud of themselves did not know what was going on. You are soldiers from that army? How dare you not listen to the Grand Tutor's orders and act on your own? At this time, the general of the city guards realized that the other party had a strong background. Even if they had a strong background, so what? As long as they came from outside the city, they had to pay money. What's more, it was no longer a simple matter of paying money. These people dared to disobey the Grand Tutor. They deserved to die. The general of the city guards was so angry that his eyes turned red. With a roar, he chopped at the carriage not far away. However, before he could get close to the carriage, he was intercepted by a figure that descended from the sky. That man was very tall, almost 2 meters tall, and almost blocked all the light. He even carried a weapon that looked like an iron cylinder on his shoulder. Who the hell do you think you are? How dare you rob our boss's carriage? Take money? Take your grandma's money. When my boss started to make money by building armaments in this Sigio city, you were still hiding in God knows which corner of the city you were in. Chapter 850. Hellion Vivian laughed when she heard the voice. She lazily said to the people outside the carriage, "Deshion, why are you here?" "Boss, it's not just me. All of my brothers are here. We followed your carriage as soon as it returned to the capital," Deshion said with a smile. More than a dozen black figures descended from the sky one after another. Each of them had excellent skills and had different appearances. Some were tall, some were short, some were thin, and some were strong. Even the weapons in their hands were different. However, the only similarity was that those weapons were very rare. When Hellion Vivian heard that all her people were here, She looked back at Beligaju and said, "I'll do it this time." Her voice was full of excitement. His Highness squeezed her hand and said, "Why are you here? Aren't you afraid of hurting your stomach?" Hellion Vivian thought about it and felt that it was right. She asked the people outside, "Deshiong, have you brought the sniper cannon?" "I've been carrying it." Deshiong lifted the black tube on his shoulder when he said this. Hellion Vivian narrowed her beautiful phoenix eyes and said, "Then just blow up the city gate directly. Keep the people. They'll be useful in the future." "Okay." Deshiong obeyed and lifted the sniper cannon. He narrowed his left eye, pointed at 3 points, and pulled the trigger with his index finger. A loud rumbling sound was heard. Sparks flew everywhere. The general was so shocked that he was stunned. He still didn't know what was going on. The city gate behind him fell down with a loud bang, and the flag was immediately lifted. The dozen soldiers standing on it also fell down from the city wall. The gravel continued to roll on the ground, making an unbelievable deafening sound. In the billowing smoke, the onlookers waved the dust in front of them with their long sleeves. There was only shock in their eyes. The general guarding the city, who was closest to Deshiong, was already in a daze. He opened his mouth wide and shook his head. His ears were still buzzing. He stared blankly at the black spear, and his legs almost lost all feeling. Why had no one ever told him about it? How could there be such a weapon in the divine land? What exactly was it? Was it dynamite? But it was different from explosives. Explosives had to be buried first before they could be ignited. While the general was still pounding his chest over the scene that had just happened, the dozen or so black figures seemed to be opening a path for the carriage. Each of them had a gun in their left and right hands. They fired together, and every shot hit the feet of the soldiers who tried to move forward. Countless sparks flew. Just as the general raised his head, he was grabbed by the throat. At that time, he only had one thought in his mind. "You. Who are you?" As he spoke, blood seeped out of his throat. That person didn't say anything. He just followed Hellion Vivian's instructions and led the people into the city. Naturally, there would be someone who would provide information. The soldiers on horseback passed through the eastern part of the city and headed straight for the Grand Preceptor's residence. At this moment, the Grand Preceptor's residence was celebrating the money they had received over the past few days. The Grand Preceptor is really smart. He came up with such a way to make money. No matter who it is, they have to pay money to enter the city. How profitable! General Ao Jiang, who was supposed to be in command in Yunnan, was eating meat in big mouthfuls. He didn't forget to weigh the heavy ingots in his hand. One of them, who looked like a civil servant, put down the golden chain in his hand and said worriedly, "What do you think will happen if the retired emperor finds out about what we've done?" "Olway, why are you so timid? When we entered the palace, you saw how the retired emperor looked. He won't live long." Ao Jiang knew that there were no outsiders here, so he didn't hide his words. He sneered and said, "The seventh prince is very powerful, but unfortunately, he's still a child. He won't understand the twists and turns of this situation. Moreover, the Grand Preceptor is in control of the palace, so no one can deliver information in the palace. The He family might have noticed something, but they are now in business. Their army is thousands of miles away from the capital city. They won't be able to save the situation here. What are you worried about? We'll get as much money as we can." Lord Wei still felt uneasy, especially since his eyelids had been twitching since the beginning. "General Ao, do you think the royal family is still alive? If he's still alive and comes back to see the capital city in such a mess, then you and I will have to meet the King of Hell." "Sigh, why are all you civil servants so timid?" Ao Jiang sneered. "He's back. Do you know where he went? The ancient tomb of the ancients. No matter how powerful he is, he will die there. Even if he comes back, there's still the Grand Preceptor. With the Grand Preceptor's power, he can be beaten out of the city." The Grand Preceptor followed Ao Jiang and had never seen Beligaju. He only heard that this person's martial chi was very high and his methods were ruthless. Even so, he was still just an ordinary human. Even if he was a member of the royal family and had the imperial energy to protect him, he was not destined to die. He was still no match for him. The Grand Preceptor was confident in his own abilities, but he was afraid of the little seventh prince in the palace. If it was not for the child, he would have taken over the retired emperor's body and done whatever he wanted. However, from the first time he saw the little seventh prince from afar, he knew that he was not to be trifled with. Fortunately, Ao Jiang was in front of him at that time. Otherwise, he would have been seen through. However, until now, he still could not see through the child's true identity. The more he was like this, the more dangerous it was. However, it did not matter. Just like what Ao Jiang said, he was just a child. As long as he did not go near the palace, the little seventh prince would not be able to detect him, no matter how he stirred up trouble in the capital city. As for the Baligija they talked about, he had never taken him seriously. The Grand Preceptor smiled and extended his hand. Come, let's have another drink. Don't worry, Lord Wei. If someone really comes, I will take care of it. With your words, I am relieved. Lord Wei smiled and was about to raise his wine cup. Suddenly, a report came from outside. Grand Preceptor, General Ao, this is bad. This is bad. Someone is leading a cavalry into the city. Crack. Lord Wei's wine cup fell to the ground. Ao Jiang stood up and said in a gloomy voice, "It is impossible for a cavalry to come at this time. Is there a mistake in the information?" "No, there is no mistake." The soldier gasped for breath and said, "This subordinate saw it with my own eyes. They have already reached the east side of the city." Ao Jiang frowned. "How many cavalry?" 1,000. The soldier just finished. Ao Jiang laughed. "It is only 1,000 people. How can you call that a cavalry? Let's go, Grand Preceptor. Let's go out and see who is so stupid. There is a path to heaven, but he did not take it. There is no door to hell." Chapter 851. Ao Jiang spoke heroically. He took his long sword and led a large group of soldiers to surround the entire East City district, blocking the incoming carriages at the entrance of Meridian Gate Market. "It's them." Ao Jiang looked at the Xiong and the rest who were clearing the way with disdain. "They want to rebel with just these few people? They don't know what's good for them." As Ao Jiang spoke, he raised one hand, and countless archers raised the bows in their hands. A thick murderous aura was on the verge of erupting. Ao Jiang originally thought that with just these few people, he could kill a large group of them with his arrows. However, he did not expect that before his army could attack, a loud rumbling sound was heard. The archers who were holding the bows were all blasted into the sky. Their opponents were extremely fast, and they were holding something in their hands, making loud banging noises. Terrifying smoke rose from all around. Those people seemed to have entered a deserted land and could wipe out thousands of soldiers with just a raise of their hands. Ao Jiang, who thought that victory was in his grasp, could not help but panic at this moment. He looked at the black figures who were getting closer and closer to him and could not help but pull a soldier to stand in front of him. However, in the next second, the soldier was shot to death. Fresh blood immediately splattered on his face. What are they holding in their hands? Ao Jiang could not help but shout. Lord Wei, who had experienced several changes in the imperial court, looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face was completely drained of color, as if he was talking to himself. That's a spear, a weapon that only the Hidden Army possesses. Why would the Hidden Army appear here? The Hidden Army would never appear of their own accord, unless their master is here too. Hellion Vivian, it's Hellion Vivian. No, this is not right. Lord Wei looked at the black cavalry that was gradually appearing before his eyes, and his lips trembled violently. It's not just Hellion Vivian, there's also the royal family. The royal family is back. When Ao Jiang heard Lord Wei's words, his face turned pale immediately. However, he still refused to accept his fate. He can't possibly come back alive. All of this is just an act. Grand Tutor. Although Ao Jiang said that he did not believe it, he felt extremely uneasy in his heart. He pulled the Grand Tutor over and said, Grand Tutor, quick, cast your spells and stop them." The Grand Tutor had never seen Ao Jiang like this before. He knew this Overlord's general from Yunnan. Ao Jiang had always been fearless. Even when he entered the palace, he did not go too far with the retired emperor. What kind of ability did the third prince have to scare him to this extent? Forget it, no matter what the other party was capable of. To him, the other party was just a mere mortal. The Grand Preceptor did not put Beligaju in his eyes at all. His eyes suddenly changed, and the horsetail whisk in his hand moved, casting a demon spell in midair. Vaguely, the surrounding air seemed to have frozen, and the temperature dropped by dozens of degrees. There also seemed to be something floating back and forth at the entrance of the market. Big Bear, who was enjoying the fight, suddenly paused. He only felt that a bloody face suddenly appeared in front of him. He couldn't help but take a big step back. When he looked carefully again, his back was terrifyingly cold. Damn it, what is this? The others also felt the uncomfortable chill. They looked at each other and felt that there was something around them. Ao Jiang saw that the other party had stopped and even started to panic. He looked back at the Grand Tutor in surprise and said, "The Grand Tutor is really capable. It's just a small trick." The Grand Tutor attacked again. The air started to form a fog, and it was slightly dark. There seemed to be shadows hidden in it, floating back and forth. Very few people would be unaffected, especially when the black gas started to spread. Deshiong could only feel that there were faces flashing before his eyes. Every face was different, but all of them were so pale that they did not seem to belong to living people. Bang! Someone could not hold it in anymore and fired the first shot. However, it did not stop anything. Instead, it almost hurt his own companions. All of this was within the Grand Tutor's expectations. He stood there, and his eyes were dark and hollow. Very soon, they would not be able to withstand the ghostly energy and would start to kill each other. Even the third prince in the carriage was the same. The Grand Tutor thought proudly. Just as he was about to launch his third attack, he was bounced back by an invisible force. He fell heavily to the ground. Pooh! Blood spurted out from his throat like spring water. In that instant, he only felt pain in his internal organs. Damn it! The Grand Tutor raised his head and absorbed the ghostly energy around him into his body. Then, he looked towards the center of the road. Could it be that there was someone here who was not controlled by the ghostly energy? No, that was impossible. Grand Tutor! Ao Jiang reached out and helped the Grand Tutor up. He looked panicked. What's going on? What's going on? The Grand Tutor was originally an evil demon. After absorbing the ghostly energy, he regained his strength. It's nothing. We just ran into a little trouble. At that moment, the Grand Tutor's eyes had started to turn red. He glared at the crowd fiercely, as if he was still trying to find the mysterious force. At that moment, the carriage that was a few meters away from him suddenly swayed and appeared in front of him. A loud bang was heard. The body of the carriage exploded from the inside. With chips visible to the naked eye flew into the air as if someone was controlling them. They hung in the air in layers, just like a scene from a comic book. In the middle of the wood shavings, on top of the chariot that had lost its body, Helian Wei Wei's lips curved slightly. Her fiery red cloak danced wildly in the wind. The night Rakshas's most beautiful wings were fluttering in the wind. Her beautiful face reflected a seductive red as she laughed lightly. Bailey Jiaju hugged her with his left hand and sat casually. Even under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he did not have the slightest intention of letting her go. Even in the midst of the billowing smoke, he was not stained by any dust. The elegant cloak draped over his shoulders made him look like an emperor who held the power of life and death in his hands, giving people a kind of absolute oppression. Around him, the evil spirits in the black gas began to tremble. Not only did they not dare to take a step forward, some even wanted to turn around and run away. However, Beligaju did not give them the chance. His dark eyes narrowed slightly. Above the carriage, a dense crowd of evil spirits and ghosts appeared. Those evil spirits rolled their bodies in the clouds. They were absolutely obedient, but they were definitely not to be trifled with. In just an instant, those evil spirits that disturbed people's thoughts were swept away like the wind. Not even a shadow was left behind. Chapter 852. Around him, the evil spirits in the black gas started to tremble. Not only did they not dare to take a step forward, some even wanted to turn around and run away. However, Beligaju did not give them the chance. His pupils in the dark night tightened. Above the carriage, a dense crowd of demons and ghosts appeared. Those demons rolled their bodies in the clouds. They were absolutely obedient, but they were definitely not to be trifled with. In just a moment, those evil spirits were wiped out. Not even a shadow was left behind. What is that? Although Ao Jiang could not see those densely packed giant creatures baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, the thick black gas was so obvious that Ao Jiang could feel the unusual atmosphere. As for the Grand Tutor, who could see everything clearly, he was scared silly. His demonic red eyes shook violently. Even his legs were trembling violently. He had only seen such a scene of a group of demons and ghosts in the night. That was almost 1,000 years ago, when the human world was not so perfect. That was when the lower three paths were the most domineering. Even the gods and Buddhists could not do anything to the lower three paths. They were no longer lowly and ugly existences. Because of that man's leadership, the lower three paths had almost reached an unprecedented peak. When he saw this scene, he was still a little monster. He watched from afar as the man led thousands of demons to suppress the Buddhist sent by the Buddhists. He created the most legendary portrait of Mount Buzhou. At that time, he wore a black cloak with long sleeves. Countless demons surged behind him, as if he was the ruler of the world. And to be able to summon so many demons, there was no one else in this world other than him. Thinking of this, the Grand Tutor's voice trembled. Your Highness. Grand Tutor, what's wrong with you? Do you know the third prince? Ao Jiang felt that the Grand Tutor in front of him was a little abnormal. He had never acted like this before. No, what third prince? That's His Highness. How could it be him? How could he be here? The Grand Tutor suddenly reached out and pulled him over. He was about to break down. His eyes stared out and his voice was almost hoarse. Why didn't you tell me that His Highness was here? Are you trying to kill me? Ao Jiang's face had already turned pale from being shaken by him. It was not because of anything else, but because the face of the person in front of him was filled with layers and layers of marks. Those runes were not something a living person could possess. The Grand Tutor did not care what Ao Jiang thought of him. He pushed the person away and turned to look at Beligaju, who was sitting in the middle of the carriage. He was finished. What mere mortals! The other party was an existence that he had to look up to even if he had cultivated for thousands of years. In this world, he would rather offend gods and Buddhas than offend this man in front of him. Grand Preceptor Ao Jiang, who was pushed away, tried to pull the Grand Tutor back to his senses. If the Grand Tutor fell, how could he fight the third prince? But for some reason, the Grand Preceptor seemed to have been possessed by something. Or was he not human in the first place? When Ao Jiang thought of this, he felt a chill run down his spine. His fingers stiffened as he stood there looking at the Grand Tutor. Beligaju, who was sitting in the carriage, only glanced at him calmly. The Grand Tutor knelt on the ground and shouted, "Your Highness, please spare my life. Your Highness, please spare my life." Ao Jiang did not expect this. He thought that the Grand Tutor had mistaken him for someone else. Moreover, the Grand Tutor had said that he did not know the third prince and that the third prince was easy to deal with. But now, the Grand Preceptor was trembling in fear. He kept kowtowing in front of the third prince. The sound of his kowtowing was so loud that anyone who heard it would feel pain. Ao Jiang only had one thought in his mind. It was over. They were completely done for. He had dared to act so recklessly in the capital city because he thought that the Grand Tutor could deal with the third prince. If the Grand Tutor had surrendered, then they would definitely be crushed to death by the third prince. He knew the third prince's methods too well. He alone could not stop him. Moreover, these soldiers dared to charge forward with him because they thought that he was a traitor who had broken into the city. If they knew that it was the third prince, then Ao Jiang did not dare to imagine what the consequences would be. He only regretted that he had provoked the third prince of all people. The official with the surname Wei had knelt on the ground the moment the carriage broke. Now, he was kowtowing along with the Grand Tutor and begging for mercy. His entire body was filled with fear. When the soldiers saw this, they looked at each other. They did not understand what was going on. Hellion Wei glanced at the mercenary beside her and signaled with her eyes. The mercenary paused and stood in front of the carriage. His voice was filled with inner strength, loud and mellow. That voice seemed to come from his Dantian, and it was deafening. The current third prince is here. Why haven't you put down the weapons in your hands? Royal family? The soldier with the bow turned around, his face full of shock. That's the royal family? What? The soldiers were stunned by this sudden news. But soon they moved. One by one, they put down the bows in their hands, knelt on the ground, and shouted, "Long live your highness." They were also afraid. Who would have thought that the person in the carriage would be the third prince? Who would have thought that the third prince would appear in front of everyone in such a manner? Everyone in the capital thought that the third prince would not survive this trip. They did not expect that not only did he return, his aura was even stronger than before. It was as if he was born to kill the world. At this moment, he looked even colder and more dangerous. The commoners standing at the side were also dumbfounded. The person who openly challenged the system of paying money to enter the city was actually the current third prince of the imperial court. They were originally worried about the owner of the carriage. They did not expect that their world-renowned third prince would really return just like that. The commoners thought. When they finally reacted, they realized something. When they came back to their senses, they knelt heavily on the ground with unprecedented joy in their eyes. In the capital, thousands of commoners knelt 10 miles away. It was a magnificent scene, and all of this was to welcome their future king back to the capital. When the Grand Tutor saw this scene, he had other thoughts in his mind. He stepped back, wanting to take the opportunity to escape. However, at this moment, Chapter 853. Suddenly, a deadly voice rang out in the air. "Lin, soldier." The Grand Tutor raised his head abruptly, his eyes wide open. That is... Do. Hellion Vivian's fingers moved, her eyes as clear as torches. The Grand Tutor looked as if he had seen the most terrifying enemy in his life, his lips trembling. The 9 mantras. How can this human know the 9 mantras? Ja. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curled. Jiesh. The Grand Tutor thought that he could escape. After all, he was an illusion of an evil spirit without a physical body. As long as he was not too close to Her Highness, he still had a chance to escape. However, if he encountered an exorcist, it would not be so easy for him to escape. It seemed that he could only discard his shell. As if she had seen through his thoughts, Hellion Vivian's smile grew wider. She cupped her hands in front of her. Exorcism. There was a loud rumble. There seemed to be 1,000 feet of spiritual light floating under his feet, converging into a phoenix bathed in fire in midair, charging down with Buddha's aura. At this moment, the Grand Tutor was completely shocked. Then, an overwhelming fear swept through from the depths of his body. He had only seen this kind of light at Mount Buzhou. That was not the normal 9 mantras, but the roar of the ancient phoenix. It's over. This time, he was really done for. Before the Grand Tutor could open his mouth, his body was penetrated by the Buddha's light. The burning pain spread from his chest to the rest of his body. Every inch of his body was burned to the extreme. The soldiers could only watch helplessly as another figure suddenly emerged from the body of the Grand Preceptor, whom they had once worshipped. That figure's appearance was abnormally terrifying. It was wearing a long robe that had been soaked in water, dripping with water. Its face was like that of a sorcerer's. A.O. Jiang, who was standing beside him, saw this scene. His face changed in fear. He tripped and almost fell to the ground. The soldiers were even more terrified. Their shoulders trembled. They were afraid that the figure would pounce on them. However, what they were worried about did not happen. Because the figure had just risen, it was completely annihilated by the phoenix's fire. It seemed to be struggling desperately as it let out a painful roar from its throat. But no matter how he struggled, he could not escape the fate of being subdued. The speed of the Buddha's light was very fast. so fast that people could only hear the regretful wails of the evil spirits. I really didn't expect the Grand Preceptor to be an evil being that would harm the capital. The commoners were very scared. They looked at this scene with lingering fear and chanted Umibba. Luckily, the third princess consort was here. Did you see that just now? The third princess consort really looked like the reincarnation of an immortal. A living bodhisattva. He's a living bodhisattva. It's really our good fortune to have such a princess. As the people spoke, they couldn't help but kowtow and shout, "Long live the princess! Long live the princess!" Helene Vivian's actions had always been natural and unrestrained, allowing the people to rise. Then, she retracted her hand and said in a low voice, "This way, I can save one more dish for the baby." Baligaju was sitting next to her. After hearing her words, he raised his eyebrows. The bigger fetus also moved its hands and feet coolly. Helene Vivian moved and smiled gently as she stroked her lower abdomen. It seems that the baby likes it very much. His Highness had always disliked this woman paying attention to anyone other than himself. He reached out and pulled Helene Vivian into his arms again. He sneered at her lower abdomen. What else can that little brat do besides eat? The bigger fetus narrowed its blood-red eyes and turned to the smaller fetus. "I think I've been too kind to Father recently." The smaller fetus sighed and slowly opened its eyes. "Big brother, believe me, that's just your imagination." "Oomph." The bigger fetus's voice became even softer. "Anyway, we're going to get out soon. Once we get out, I'll let Father know that other than eating, I can also go against him." The smaller fetus, "Why do I feel like I'm listening to my big brother's life work?" "You're much better now. I can go out to look for food at night. I'll catch a few ghosts for you to play with," the bigger fetus said as he hugged the smaller fetus in his arms. It was very domineering and cold. The smaller fetus nodded. "Okay." The two little ones always had a loving relationship. However, the situation outside was not so peaceful. Lord Wei was afraid of death. Before Bailey Jia Ju could ask him anything, he took a few steps forward on his knees and begged for mercy. "Your Highness, this old official knows his mistake. This time, this old official really knows his mistake. We didn't do anything but embezzled some money. This old official didn't dare to touch the money because it's still in this old official's house. I beg your Highness to spare this old official's life on account of this old official's hard work for the imperial court all these years." After Lord Wei finished speaking, he kowtowed loudly. Baligaju did not look at him. Instead, he looked at Ao Jiang absent-mindedly. "You brought these soldiers here?" Ao Jiang was basically scared out of his wits. Without anyone to rely on, his whole body trembled. He wanted to plead for mercy like Lord Wei. He kowtowed again and said, "Yes, but I didn't expect that the person who came in would be your Highness." Before he could finish, Ao Jiang saw the other party narrowing his eyes. There seemed to be something flashing in those deep eyes that could almost prick one's nerves. Ao Jiang felt like his chest was about to explode. He was in so much pain that his face turned pale. Only then did he realize that the other party could kill them without even lifting a finger. There was a loud bang. His body was bounced back by an unknown mysterious force. Both Ao Jiang and Lord Wei had blood gushing out of their mouths. They lay on the ground with their limbs broken. The only difference was that one's meridians were shattered while the other was still alive. Baligaju laughed. His voice was cold. "This is my territory. Those who bring soldiers here die." The word death made the soldiers who had just surrendered feel a lingering fear. Ao Jiang listened. In the end, he could not withstand the intense pain in his body. He tilted his head and stopped breathing completely. After such a battle, no one dared to stop the carriage. Thousands of soldiers stepped back in a well-trained manner, automatically leaving a path to the palace. It was from that day onwards, regardless of whether it was the War Dragon Dynasty or any country other than the War Dragon Dynasty, no one dared to bring soldiers to the capital. Because no one could forget how the third prince of the War Dragon Dynasty killed Ao Jiang that day. Ao Jiang knew how to use soldiers and knew how to scheme. In addition, he had the best geographical conditions. However, he was still destroyed by Beligaju without batting an eyelid. No one dared to risk their lives. Even if they could not be friends with Beligaju, they would rather not be his enemy. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.